I was 9 years old, and I was the worst fighter in the poorest district in the whole kingdom. I tell you that first because everything good that came later started from exactly how low I began. The yard was packed dirt and wooden swords. Boys swung, dust rose, and the bigger ones laughed while they did it. I was fast. I was also thin as a fence post, and in a place that ranked boys by who they could knock flat, fast, and thin came in dead last. A big boy stepped into the circle. 11 years old, a head taller, shoulders like a small door. He leveled his wooden sword at my chest and grinned. "Go home, weakling." Then he came at me. I ducked the first swing and slipped under the second, and for 3 whole seconds I felt like the cleverest boy alive. Then the third swing found the side of my head, and the white light behind my eyes ate the yard, the boys, and the rest of the afternoon. Here is the part nobody expected. Lying in the dirt with my ears ringing, I was not crushed. I had a quiet little theory even then. Being the worst meant the only way left was up, and being counted as nothing is a wonderful disguise. The bullies walked off counting me as furniture. Good. Furniture sees everything and gets blamed for none of it. I lay there and grinned at the sky like an idiot with a fresh bruise on his head. Then the sky answered. It tore open with a sound like a mountain dropped onto a drum, and the whole district flinched at once. Far above my dusty little yard, where nobody in Ashward was looking, something enormous was dying. A ship the size of a cathedral fell through the sky with its hull on fire. Inside it, 2 figures fought a control panel that had stopped listening to them. The first one dragged his hands across dead switches. "The engines are gone," he said. "Every one of them." The second one did not waste breath arguing. He pressed a single glowing panel and spoke to someone who was not standing in the room with them. "We used the jump," he said. "Forgive me, Nova." White light folded over both of them, and then the 2 pilots were simply not there anymore. The ship kept falling, lighter and emptier than before, still carrying the one thing they had chosen to leave behind. It came down far past the tree line, in the deep part of the forest where even grown hunters from my district refused to go. The crash dragged me up out of the dark behind my eyes. I sat up in the empty yard. The other boys had scattered like startled birds. A thick column of smoke was already climbing over the forest, black against a bruised evening sky. Now, any sensible child in my position would have done the obvious thing. Go home, eat supper, live a normal, boring, satisfyingly long life. The forest scared every adult I knew. But the lump on my skull had knocked my good sense loose, and curiosity is the one muscle I have always had far too much of. So I touched the swelling on my head, looked at that smoke, and started walking straight toward it. In my defense, I have never once in my life done the sensible thing on the first try. Where the sky had hit the ground, the trees lay flattened in a wide circle, still smoking. In the center sat a thing made of metal, bigger than my house, ticking to itself as it cooled. I should have run. Instead, I climbed over a fallen trunk and crept closer, because apparently 9-year-old me had decided that fear was a luxury for people with better options. There was a crack down one side of the hull, and through it came a soft blue light. A voice drifted out with it, flat and calm, like still water that had never once been afraid of anything in its life. "Carrier not found," it said. "Survival mode. Scanning." I reached out and laid my hand flat against the warm metal. The blue light surged up my arm, the whole forest went silent, and the world tipped sideways. I came to sitting against a tree with no memory of getting there, both hands clamped over my ears. The ringing faded. Then a new voice spoke, and this one was not coming from the machine in front of me. It was coming from somewhere inside my own head. It was my mother's voice, warm, familiar, the exact tone she used when she told me to sleep. I shot upright. "Who is there?" I demanded of the empty trees. "I borrowed a voice that would keep you calm," it answered, still wearing my mother's warmth. "My name is Nova. I am a neural intelligence. I am inside you now." "Will you always be in my head?" I asked. "As long as you are alive, yes." "Okay," I said. There was a small pause. "That is all," the voice asked. "You will not ask anything more than that?" "I will," I told it. "But it is getting dark, and if I am late, my mother will end my short life in ways your scanning has not begun to imagine." "One thing first," Nova said as I scrambled to my feet. "I see only what you see. I hear only what you hear. If you look away from a problem, so do I. Try to remember that." "Noted," I said, already running. It would take me far too long, and one terrible night, to understand how much that single sentence would cost. So I ran home through the dark while Nova narrated my entire district like a clerk taking inventory of a barn. "Population density below average," she noted. "House sizes indicate the lowest income tier in the region. The drainage is poor, and there is a great deal of livestock very close to the kitchens. You really do not have to say all of that out loud, I told her. My mother was waiting in the doorway with the particular stillness of a woman deciding which of my bones to start with. Nova, eager to be useful, offered a plan. Tell her you were relieving yourself in the woods, she whispered. So I told my mother I had been relieving myself in the woods. For 2 hours, my mother took my ear between two fingers and lifted. I rose onto my toes like a puppet on a string and made a sound I will not be describing to anyone. Fascinating, said Nova. Local disciplinary technique logged. The grip applies remarkable leverage to a very small joint. I am updating my model of this household accordingly. Social lying, she added after a thoughtful moment, is clearly not my department. Please, I said through my teeth, as quietly as a boy can manage while hanging from his own ear. Stop helping me. My mother let go, pointed at the table, and set food in front of me without a single word, which in our house was the same thing as a hug. I ate. Nova went quiet and watched the strange business of a tired woman who skipped her own supper so her useless son could fill his stomach. Inefficient, Nova noted at last. She gives away food she clearly needs. I told her to log it and say nothing else. It was the first thing in my whole world she could not put a number to. It would not be the last. That night I lay in the dark long after the house went still. Nova noticed that my heartbeat would not slow down. Your pulse is elevated, she said. You are not in danger. Explain. So I explained. Tomorrow they announce the tournament between the districts, I told her. Ours is Ashward. We are the poorest. We have never won it. Not once in the whole history of the thing. I waited a breath, then asked the question I actually wanted to ask. Will you help me change that number? Current probability of Ashward winning the tournament, Nova said. 4%. 4%. She read it out the way you would read out the weather. I lay there in the dark and turned that little number over and over. Then she kept going, because she could not help herself. Probability assumes no change in current variables, she said. Your district is underfed, under-equipped, and openly mocked. Your own team considers you a burden. The physical risk to a child of your size is considerable. I can list the failure modes in order of likelihood, beginning with the most probable, which is that you simply do not come home, and continuing through a further 19 scenarios that range from broken to dead. Nova, I said. She stopped. Yes, just yes or no. Will you help me drag 4% all the way up to 100? The pause after that was the longest she ever gave me. I could almost feel her running the whole world through that cold blue head, hunting for the honest answer that would let her tell a 9-year-old no. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes. For the first time since the wooden sword cracked into my skull, I smiled and meant every bit of it. The number had a witness now, and the witness could count. Build the team. Find the resources nobody else bothered to look for. Win the thing we were never meant to win. Simple. I fell asleep counting every way it could kill me, and for the first time the counting felt like a plan instead of a fear. I should have slept. Instead, I lay there making plans with a voice that did arithmetic while I dreamed. What I did not understand yet was how the next day would actually begin, not with a fight I could win, with a public one I could not. By noon, the whole kingdom would be standing shoulder to shoulder on the central square. 4 districts, 4 teams, 1 prize that decided who mattered for the next 10 years, and my district would shuffle in last, to the same tired laughter we always got. A girl with white hair and a straight back would stand at the front of the strongest team, 7 years of victories behind her. The crowd already adored her, and she had not yet said a single word. She would look across the square at us, at the patched coats, the hungry faces, the skinny 9-year-old somebody had dragged along to keep an eye on. And then she would say the cruelest thing one person can say to another, in the gentlest possible voice. A pitiful little sight, she would say. She would not shout it. She would not need to. The crowd was already hers, and my own neighbors would shrink and study their own feet, getting ready to pretend I was not really one of them. That was tomorrow. Tonight I still had 4%, a voice in my head that could do the math, and a stubborn refusal to go home and live the boring life. Honestly, that was a great deal more than I had woken up with. Her name was Sylvia. Remember it. I certainly did. Morning came too fast, the way it always does right before something you cannot stop. The central square of the kingdom could hold every district at once, and on tournament day it did. Banners, vendors, a stone platform in the middle, and a crowd already thick enough to lean on. We walked in with my father at the front. Ren, built like a door and about as talkative. Grandpa Mark beside him, 60 years old, 40 of them spent inside the forest. Behind them, the rest of us, including the one boy nobody had actually wanted to bring along. The herald climbed the platform and called the 4 districts. Aurum, the crowd roared, Mercanto. Loud applause, a few sharp cheers, Stonehall, a heavy, respectful silence for the captain with the scarred face, Ashward. We got a thin scatter of claps and one very clear laugh. I knew that laugh. We all did. Ashward had been the kingdom's punchline for longer than I had been alive, and you learn to wear that like a coat you are never allowed to take off. Crowd response to Ashward is lower than the response to Aurum by roughly 340%, Nova reported. I know, I told her. My ears handled that particular calculation on their own, thank you. I kept my chin level and looked straight ahead, because the first thing a furniture boy learns is that flinching is the exact thing they are waiting for. Up on the platform, the white-haired girl turned her head, slow and certain, and found us in the crowd. Sylvia did not hurry. She let her eyes travel down our line, the patched coats, the thin arms, and stopped on me. The smallest, the youngest, the most obvious mistake in the square. They brought a child, she said. She did not raise her voice. That was the cruel part. She said it the way you would point out a crack in a wall, and the whole front of the crowd heard it and smiled. Then she made it worse because she had range. A pitiful little sight, she added, and turned back to her own team as if we had already been filed away. What came next was the part that actually cut. One of my own neighbors, a grown man from Ashward, went red and called out toward Aurum. He is not really one of us, he said. We just brought him to keep an eye on him. Your allies, Nova observed quietly, just disowned you in public to raise their own standing. I am logging this as relevant. Log it, I thought. Log every single word. I did not look at my feet. I wanted to. The pull to study my own boots was almost physical, and half the square was waiting for exactly that. So I lifted my head another finger's width and looked right back at her instead. She had already stopped seeing me. That was fine. People who stop seeing you hand you everything because they stop being careful around the furniture. So I made a quiet bet with myself, standing there at 9 years old. Not out loud. Out loud is for amateurs. If we lived, and if we won, that one gentle sentence of hers would become the most expensive thing she had ever said. A pitiful little sight. I tucked it away next to the 4% and let the two of them keep me warm. The herald lifted a scroll, and the square went quiet because everyone knew the rules were the place where the laughing stopped. Phase 1, he read. 3 days in the wild forest. Survival and gathering. There are no rules inside the forest. He let that sit. No rules. In a place packed with teams who wanted to win and a forest full of things that wanted to eat, no rules meant one thing only. Whatever happened in there, happened, and nobody outside would ever count the cost. Phase 2, he went on. The auction. Each district brings what it found to a panel of foreign merchant judges. The judges weigh the worth. The district that brings the greatest value takes the tournament. And the prize. A royal trade patent for 10 years. A shop in the center of the kingdom, free of every tax. The title of First District. The future of the kingdom, he finished, turns on the result. So it was not a game. It was survival wearing a merchant's coat, with a crown waiting at the far end of it. 10 years of patent, a shop that paid no tax in the richest quarter of the kingdom. For a district that measured a good day by whether everyone had eaten, that was not a prize. That was a whole different life, handed to one team and torn out of the hands of the other 3. No rules in the forest means physical removal is legal, Nova said. For a team built on a child and a handful of underfed adults, the risk just climbed sharply. She paused, then added in the same flat tone. In my experience, no rules is usually a rule written by the strong for the worst among them. You have been alive for 1 day, I reminded her. I read very quickly, she said. Around us, the other districts were already measuring each other like wolves deciding the order of a meal. Ashward did the thing Ashward always did. We pulled into a tight knot and tried to look like we belonged in the picture. The adults of my district put their heads together to make a plan, and I made the mistake of actually having one. Nova had been scanning since we reached the square, and she had found something. The North River, she told me. It runs dry of fish this week, every year. Whatever your team is counting on there will not be waiting for them. It was good. It was specific. It was exactly the kind of thing that wins 3 days in a forest. So I stepped into the circle of grown men and opened my mouth. The North River is going to be empty, I said. We should not waste the first morning walking to it. My father looked down at me, not unkindly. That was almost worse. Ren put one heavy hand on my shoulder and turned me a quarter step out of the circle. Kai, he said, go stand with the others and do not get in the way. That was all of it. No argument, because to argue with someone, you first have to count him as a voice, and I was not a voice yet. I was a thing you kept an eye on. I did the math anyway, because the math was all I had. A wasted morning at a dead river was 4 hours. 4 hours in a 3-day tournament, with the strongest team in the kingdom already screaming somewhere in the north. I just could not make a grown man hear those 4 hours in the voice of a boy he had promised to watch. Nova, I asked silently, do you happen to have a setting that makes a 9-year-old sound like a 40-year-old man with a beard? She was quiet. Nova, I am considering the question honestly, she said, and I would rather not lie to you twice in a single day. That stung worse than Sylvia had. I went and stood with the others, swallowed it down, and started doing the one thing still left to me. Watching, counting, waiting for the forest to prove me right where my words could not. The teams went into the forest one at a time in the order the crowd respected them. Aram first, to cheers, Mercanto next, Stonehall, quiet and grim, then us. Somebody near the front cupped his hands and shouted after our backs, try not to get lost. The laughter chased us all the way to the tree line. I filed it away with the rest of the collection. Honestly, I thought, advice not to get lost would be far more useful packaged with a map, but nobody hands the poorest district a map. They handed a punchline and a head start measured in mockery. I counted my own team as we walked in. My father, Grandpa Mark already reading the ground. Victor, a broad, careful man who watched everything and said almost nothing. Bob, my round friend, sweating and hungry before we had even started. And a quiet girl named Leia, drifting at the edge of us, picking at plants nobody else bothered to notice. 6 people the kingdom had written off, 1 forest, and a voice in my head that could do arithmetic. I had worked with worse. That was a lie, of course. I had never worked with anything at all. But it felt like the right thing to think while stepping into a place that ate people. I was the last boy of the last team to leave the square. The very back of the very bottom. If you are going to start somewhere, start where the only move left to make is up. Behind me, the roar of the crowd cut off all at once, the way sound dies when the trees close over your head. Ahead of me, the forest sat darker than it had any right to be at midday, and far, far too quiet. 3 days, Nova said. We begin now. The forest did not feel like the woods near my district. It felt like a room where something very large was holding its breath. Nova went to work the moment we crossed the line. Tracks, she said. Large animal, 4 toes, passed through before dawn. Heavy. Steer your team off the soft ground to the west. I nudged us east without making it look like I was steering anything. Grandpa Mark glanced at me once, the way you glance at a clock that seems to be running fast, then kept walking. We had gone maybe 20 minutes when the sound came. It came from the north, far off, thin and human. A scream cut short, then nothing. Then a silence that was somehow louder than the scream had been. The whole team stopped at once. Bob grabbed my sleeve. Even Victor went stiff and still. Grandpa Mark lowered his voice. That is north of us, he said. Stonehall went north. That is Stonehall. Nobody answered him. There was nothing to say that would make the north any quieter. I waited for Nova to hand me a number, a probability, a cause, anything. She did that with everything. It was the most reliable thing about her. She said nothing at all. Nova, I thought. Still nothing. And that frightened me more than any number she could have read out, because it meant the math had walked into a place she did not want a 9-year-old to hear out loud. We were not the strongest team in this forest. We were not the fastest or the biggest. Stonehall was all 3, and the trees had just taken one of them before lunch. So we would not survive by being strong. I looked at Grandpa Mark reading the dirt, at Leah already holding a leaf up to what little light there was, and I started doing the only thing that had ever kept me breathing. I started paying attention. Then we turned toward the North River my father refused to skip, and walked straight into our first disaster. The North River was exactly as empty as Nova had promised it would be. We reached it mid-morning, and the adults spread out along the bank with nets and spears and an enormous amount of confidence. They worked it for hours, and caught reeds, mud, and one extremely angry frog. Time lost so far, 4 hours, Nova reported in my ear. Your estimate this morning was correct. The fish are gone for the season. Correct and useless, I thought. I had said this exact thing at dawn, and being right at dawn had changed nothing, because nobody bothers to count a clock with a face they do not recognize. This is the part nobody warns you about, being clever and small at the same time. The knowing is the easy half. Getting a single soul to listen is the entire war. I had won my argument with the river. I had lost it with the men who actually mattered. Bob flopped down next to me, red and damp, and watched his own father slap the water with a net for the 9th pointless time. Hey Kai, he said. If the fish are not here, can we file a complaint? With the fish. Tell them they are bad at their one job. I told him it was the smartest plan anyone from Ashward had offered all morning, and I was only half joking when I said it. Then Grandpa Mark, who had not touched the water once, set down his pack, rolled his sleeves to the elbow, and stepped in. Everyone watched him, because when Grandpa Mark moved on purpose, you stopped what you were doing to find out why. He did not splash. He did not cast wide. He waded out slow, stopped where the current went quiet behind a rock, and stood there like he had grown straight up out of the riverbed. He did not move for a long minute, neither did the water. Then his hand came down, smooth and certain, and came back up with a fish. The fish did not leave, he said, without turning around. They just do not like noise. You all walked in shouting, and they slid under the bank. Quiet pool, slow hand. That is the whole secret. His hand went down again. Another fish, then another. In the time it takes a man to lose his temper, the old hunter pulled 5 fat fish out of a river the rest of us had buried. 5 fish. Out of nothing. I sat there running the arithmetic and felt something quietly rearrange itself inside my skull. Nova was doing the same. I have no data point for that, she admitted. My model said the water held no viable catch. He carries 40 years of this forest that exists nowhere in my records. He read a variable I cannot see. She paused. He is functionally a highly efficient extraction module. Do not, I said, ever say that to his face, or his back, or anywhere within a day's walk of him. Understood, said Nova, but the lesson had already landed, and it was a great deal bigger than 5 fish. Nova could read the world like a printed page. Grandpa Mark could read the parts of it nobody had ever written down. The river had not proven me wrong. It had shown me exactly what I had been missing. My father said nothing, because he never did. But I watched him look at the empty river the men had wasted a whole morning on, then over at the boy who had called it dry at dawn. He still did not listen to me. For the first time, though, he did not look away first. While the others cleaned the catch, a shadow fell across me. Victor. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, the sort who made you instinctively check whether you had done something wrong lately. He crouched down to my level, which almost nobody ever bothered to do, and studied me for a while. You knew about the river, he said, this morning. Before any of it happened. It was not a question, and it was not praise. It was a man turning over a stone to see what lived underneath. I felt Nova go very still, the way she did when something actually mattered. I thought the banks looked dry, I said. Lucky guess. Victor kept looking. He had a way of being silent that pushed harder than other men managed by shouting. That was the funny thing about Victor, I would learn over time. Even his trust came out sounding faintly like a threat. He did not call me a liar. He did not call me clever either. He just filed it away somewhere behind his eyes, the same way I had filed the laugh on the square, and stood back up. Lucky guess, he repeated, like he was tasting the words and finding them slightly off. In a district that had spent the whole morning looking past me, one grown man had just refused to stop looking at me. It was not trust yet, but it was the door that trust walks in through. Victor came back that evening, after the fish were eaten and the fire had burned low. He sat down across from me without asking, which is its own quiet kind of respect, and got straight to the point. Tomorrow, he said, where do we go? And do not tell me again that you saw the banks were dry. So there it was, the first real test, laid down flat by the one adult who had decided to stop pretending I was furniture. Give him another lucky guess and he would walk. Give him a direction and have it be wrong, he would walk faster and take his face and his weight with him. Nova was already moving. East and up, she said. There is high ground past the second ridge. Old game trails, water that runs clean, and the wind there carries our scent away from us, instead of toward whatever hunts at night. It is where I would build a camp. I looked Victor straight in the eye, which is harder than it sounds when you are 9, and he is built like a barn, and I said it without the word lucky anywhere in it. East past the second ridge, I told him. High ground over the trails. Cleaner water, better wind. We move at first light. Victor did not smile. He nodded once, slow, like a man laying down a bet he could not afford to lose. Then he said the thing that made him mine. If you are right, boy, I follow you tomorrow too. Was that an ally just now? Nova asked quietly after he had gone. Or a threat? In Ashword, I told her, those two things are very often the same. I lay awake that night, working out what had actually shifted, because something had. For one whole day, I had treated Nova like an answer box. Ask the box, get the truth, win the game. The river had snapped that idea cleanly in half. Nova had been right that the fish were gone, and completely useless at putting any in a pot. Grandpa Mark had been wrong to walk there, and the only one who came back with supper. So I built the new rule, and I said it to her in my head where neither of us could pretend later that I had not. We do not replace Grandpa Mark, I told her. We do not replace any of them. We find the exact spot where their experience goes blind, and we put you there. You are not the team. You are the part of the team that sees the part nobody else can. There was a pause. Then Nova said, That reassigns me from the single most important component to one component among several. Yes, I said. Welcome to having a family. Another pause. Can a neural intelligence be insulted? She asked. I do not know, I said. But the experiment is already running, and the early results are very promising. So tomorrow I would not just ask Nova where to go. I would ask Grandpa Mark where the animals refuse to walk, and ask the quiet girl Leah which plants the forest used to mark its dangers, and let Nova stitch all three answers into one map. The cheat alone was never going to be enough. The cheat plus the cast-offs might just be unbeatable. She went quiet, and it was not her cold quiet. It was the quiet of something honestly turning a new idea over and over. I had a voice in my head that could count the entire world. Now, I had something better than that. A voice that had just agreed to count it together with the exact people the world had thrown away. That warm feeling lasted right up until Nova ruined it. Parallel movement, she said without warning. West of us, matching our pace. It has been there a while. The probability that we are being followed is high. I did not turn my head. I had learned that much already. Who? I thought. Too far to be certain, she said. But it moves as a group, it moves quietly, and it stops when we stop. That is not an animal. Animals do not care which way you are heading. Mercanto. It had to be them. The smiling team, the one the crowd adored, the one that played dirty behind a friendly face. We had been in the forest a single day, we had 5 fish and a patch of high ground, and we already had a tail. And that, strangely enough, was the first piece of good news all day. Think about it, I told Nova. Yesterday we were a joke nobody could be bothered to watch. Today somebody thinks we are worth following. You do not waste men shadowing a team that has nothing. We just got promoted from punchline to target. Being invisible had been insulting. Being visible was clearly going to be a great deal of work. I genuinely could not decide which of the two I hated less. Either way, the rule did not change. We move at first light. We find whatever they are waiting on before they do. Then we make it too heavy and too loud to lift in the dark. You cannot quietly steal a thing an entire team is standing on. I told Victor and Grandpa Mark quietly, only the two of them. We changed nothing in how we walked, so the tail would never know it had been spotted. But I lay down that night with my back to the others and my eyes wide open. Late, when the fire had burned down to embers, Nova woke me. The tail has not come closer, she said. But it has not left either. They are waiting to see what we find before they decide it is worth taking. So they would let us do all the hard work first, then come and lift the prize. Clever. Ugly, but clever. I stayed awake until the gray crept in, watching the patch of dark where Mercanto sat waiting on us. We had 5 fish, a shadow on our trail, and a sunrise on the way. By the end of the next day, we would be carrying something worth 100 times more than fish. And that, I already understood, was the exact moment the stealing would begin. At first light, I did the thing that cost me the most and gained me the most. I swallowed my pride and asked instead of argued. I found Grandpa Mark checking his snares and crouched down beside him. Grandpa, I said, where do the animals go around? Not through. Around. What patch of this forest does everything refuse to cross? He squinted at me. It was the question of a hunter, not a child, and we both knew it the moment it left my mouth. Nova naturally had opinions. I have 7 questions that would sharpen the map, she said. If you ask them in order, I can narrow our search radius by a considerable margin. 1 question, I told her. Grandpa Mark answers exactly 1 before he decides he is being interrogated, and an interrogated old man tells you nothing but the weather. So I asked the 1, and the old man pointed his chin west and a little north. There, he said. Cats keep a stretch over that ridge. Big ones. Game walks a full mile out of its way to skip it. I never went in. Never had a reason. There was a reason now. A place even the animals respected was a place hiding something worth respecting. I felt Nova quietly tear up her whole map and redraw it around one old man's chin. That was the new shape of us. Nova for the numbers, Grandpa Mark for the things no number had ever bothered to record, and me in the middle stitching the two together. We went west and a little north, and at the edge of the cat's ground, the forest stopped letting us through. They came out of the brush without a sound. Wild cats, lean and scarred, bigger than any house cat had a right to be, and they spread across the trail in a loose line that said this far and no farther. The adults reached for their spears. I put a hand up. Do not, I said. You cannot win a fight you do not need to have. Watch. I crouched, slow, and laid one of our fish on the ground in the gap between us. 1 fish, out of 5. Behind me, I heard Bob make a small, wounded sound. Kai, he whispered, that is food. That is our food. You are handing our food to a cat. He stared at that fish the way other boys stare at a family heirloom being given away to a stranger. I almost laughed. I did not, because the lead cat had already started to move. Victor stepped up beside me, arms crossed, and laid down his second bet of the tournament, low enough that only I could hear it. If that cat walks us into an empty patch of weeds, he said, you do not say one clever word until nightfall. Agreed. Agreed, I said. The lead cat sniffed the fish, ate it in 3 bites. Then it looked up at me, long and level, the exact way Victor looked at me, turned, and walked into the trees. 2 steps in, it stopped and glanced back. It was waiting for us. Grandpa Mark let out a slow breath. He is calling us, the old man said, so quietly it was like he did not trust his own mouth. So we followed a wild cat into the one stretch of forest the entire animal kingdom had agreed to avoid. On the word of a 9-year-old who had just spent a fifth of our food on a hunch, the cat led us through a gap in the rocks I would never have found alone, into a hollow where the trees leaned over like a roof. And then I stopped, because the ground had gone blue, grass. A whole meadow of it, blue as deep water, swaying with no wind to push it. I had never seen anything like it in my life. Neither for once had Grandpa Mark, and that told me more than any glow could have. Nova came alive in my head. Blue grass, she said, and there was something close to hunger in the cold voice now. S-class botanical. It is in the merchant records. It does not grow on cultivated land. Market value, maximum. I mean maximum, Kai. How maximum? I asked. A single sack outprices everything your district earns in a full season, she said. There is enough standing here for 3. 3 sacks. I stood at the edge of that blue field and watched our 4% crack open down the middle. 5 fish this morning. 3 sacks of the rarest grass in the kingdom by noon. The arithmetic of my entire life was rearranging itself right in front of me. Probability of Ashward winning, Nova updated, now climbing from 4% toward 18. 18. Still small, still a joke to anyone standing in that square. But it was more than 4 times the boy they laughed at yesterday, and we still had 2 days left to run. The cat settled at the meadow's edge and watched us work, like landlords inspecting their tenants. Do not, I told Nova before she could begin, attempt to open negotiations with the cats on behalf of the district. I was merely going to observe, she said, that they appear to control a strategic asset. Noted. We do not sign treaties with cats. Now help me cut this without ruining it. That last part turned out to matter far more than I understood, because the moment Bob grabbed a fistful and yanked, the grass in his hand went gray and dead, and Nova flinched. Wrong, she said. Value destroyed. Tell him to stop pulling. I did not know the right way to do it. Nova did not know either, not precisely, but a small voice did, not like that. It was Leah, the quiet girl who never spoke first, who drifted at the edge of every group I had ever stood in. She knelt by the grass and showed us, shallow, just above the root, a clean, slow angle. Cut it high, she said. Pull it, and the blue dies. Everyone knows that. Nobody knew that. That was the whole point of her. You knew, I said. You know this grass. She shrugged, eyes down, already shrinking back toward invisible. I just walk in the woods, she said. Since I was 5 years old, nobody ever looks. I looked. Leah, I said, loud enough for the grown men to hear me clearly. You know this. So you run the cutting. Everyone does it your way. There was a pause you could lean on. A 9-year-old had just put the quiet girl in charge of the most valuable thing our district had ever touched, and the adults had to decide whether they could swallow it. Victor swallowed it first. He knelt down next to Leah, copied the angle she showed him, and cut the grass as carefully as if the blades might file a formal complaint about him afterward. Grandpa Mark followed. Then, last and slowest, my father. Leah's hand stopped shaking after the 3rd stalk. By the 10th, she was correcting Victor's angle without flinching, and Victor was letting her do it. The girl nobody ever looked at was running the most important harvest in Ashward's history. Bob, who had mourned a single fish like a lost relative, now held a sack open for her without one word of complaint. Even he had understood. The quiet girl was worth listening to, and in Ashward, that counted as a brand new law. That, more than the grass itself, was the moment I knew we could actually win this thing. We had 3 sacks of bluegrass and a brand new problem made entirely of men. Nova caught it first. Mercanto sign, she said, fresh. They circled the area while we cut. They know we found something. They do not yet know what it is or where this meadow sits. Good. A thief who knows you have treasure but not where it lies is a thief you can lead in a circle until his feet bleed. Let them follow us, I told the team. Just not here. We carry the sacks out the long way, loud and slow, and we walk their eyes straight to the dead end past the river. They can spend the whole night searching a patch of absolutely nothing. We did exactly that. We made a show of hauling the heavy sacks east, then doubled back along the route Nova mapped and tucked the meadow behind us as if it had never existed at all. Anyone tracking us would burn the entire night on an empty stretch of dirt. Quick count, the way Nova liked it. 3 sacks of bluegrass, worth more than Ashward had ever held at one time. 4 people I now genuinely trusted. 1 girl who had just found her voice. 1 pack of thieves chasing a dead end in the dark. For the back of the bottom, that was a very good day. Victor watched me set the whole thing up and said nothing, but I caught the look. He had bet that following me would pay out. It was paying. The man who chose to trust the strange boy had just watched that trust harden into 3 sacks of safety. You could thank me, Nova mentioned, for the route. Survive the night first, I told her. Then we will hold a ceremony in your honor. The night did not let us enjoy any of it. I had barely shut my eyes when Nova woke me, sharp. Movement, she said, inbound. 3 figures, low, coming from the dead end. They gave up on the empty patch faster than I expected. Probability that Mercanto is here to steal the grass, 96%. 96%, I thought. That is an oddly polite way to tell a boy he is being robbed. I lay still and ran the numbers. 3 thieves in the dark, a sleeping team that did not know it was under attack, 3 sacks that were the entire tournament. If they walked off with even 1, our 18% dropped straight back into the dirt we had started in. I could wake everyone. Chaos in the black, spears swinging at shadows, somebody hurt, the thieves gone with a sack while we shouted into each other's faces. Bad math. And there was a sweeter option hiding under the safe one. Mercanto had spent 2 days laughing at us. Tonight they were about to hand me the rope to hang their whole tournament with, and they were walking it in themselves. Or I could wake one man, the right one. Let the thieves walk all the way in, hands full, and catch them with the grass in their fists, where there would be nothing left to argue in front of the judges. I needed the man who had bet on me, the one whose trust would hold in the dark, with no time to explain and everything in the world to lose. I reached out in the blackness and put my hand on Victor's shoulder. His eyes opened at once. He had been sleeping half awake, the way careful men do. Trouble, I breathed. 3 of them, coming for the grass. Do exactly what I say, and we end Mercanto's tournament tonight, in front of witnesses, with the proof still in their hands. Victor looked at me for 1 long second in the dark. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a large man who had finally been handed a good reason for the size of his fists. Tell me where to stand, he said. We moved like 2 shadows, Victor and me, which is a strange thing to write about a man the size of a barn. But Victor could go quiet when it counted, and tonight it counted. Nova fed me their positions in the dark. 3 of them, she said. 2 at the sacks, 1 watching the trail. They are certain you are all asleep. We let them stay certain. I put Victor where Nova told me, in the black beside the sacks, and stood just far enough back to watch the whole thing the way you watch a trap you set with your own hands. Victor leaned down to my ear. If you are wrong about this, boy, he murmured, I carry these sacks and this mistake the rest of my life. I am not wrong, I told him. Wait until their hands are full. Hands full is the entire point. He did not ask me why. That was the part that mattered. A day ago, he would have laughed at taking orders from a 9-year-old in the dark. Tonight, he crouched in the black and waited on my word because the river had taught him one thing and the cats had taught him more. The first thief reached the sacks. The second knelt beside him. Cloth rustled. Grass shifted in the dark. Now, I breathed. Victor stood up out of the dark like the ground itself had decided to rise and took 2 fistfuls of Mercanto. The rest of the camp came awake at the noise. Spears, torches, my father on his feet before his eyes were even open. And there in the torchlight stood 2 Mercanto men with their arms full of our blue grass, blinking like startled owls. The third one ran. Nova tracked him. Gone west, fast, she said. He runs to fetch their leader. Good, let him. Their leader came faster than I expected, strolling into our firelight with the easy smile that had charmed the square, hands spread like a man greeting old friends. A misunderstanding, he said warmly. My boys got turned around in the dark. You know how the forest is at night? We will just collect our people and be on our way. Victor lifted 1 thief by the collar so the firelight caught what he was clutching. With our grass, Victor said. They got turned around, into our camp, with their arms full of our grass. The smile did not crack. It simply stopped reaching his eyes. Then he looked down at me, the smallest person at the fire, because some animal part of him had already worked out who he was actually losing to. The child, he said, almost amused. You arranged this. I did not threaten him. Threats are for people who are not sure they have already won. I just said the true thing, flat and quiet, so everyone around the fire heard it land. There will be no misunderstanding next time, I told him. There will be no next time at all. We caught you with it in your hands, and the judges are going to hear every word of it, with witnesses standing right here. His eyes changed at that. Not fear, not yet. But the first cold understanding that the joke of a district had just set its boot on his throat, and the boot belonged to a boy who had not even started shaving. The Mercanto leader took his thieves and left, because there was nothing left to do at our fire except lose more than he already had. The grass stayed, all 3 sacks of it. My father did not go back to sleep. He stood looking at me across the embers for a long while, turning over something that did not want to be turned. How did you know, Ren said at last, that they would come? Tonight. Straight for the grass. Intuition, I said. It was the lie I had settled on, the one small word that covered the voice in my head. I had used it before. It tasted worse every time, because it was a wall between me and the one man I most wanted standing on my side of it. He did not believe me. I could see that plainly. A boy does not predict thieves in the dark on a feeling, but here is the thing that had changed. A day ago he would have grunted and rolled over. Tonight he held my eyes 1 beat longer, and before he turned away, he paused. It was a small thing. You could have missed it. I did not. The man who had told me on the square to go stand with the others and not get in the way had just, for one breath, considered that the others might need to stand with me. Nova caught it too. He did not believe your answer, she said softly, but he believed the result. Keep that difference. People who reject your reasons will still follow your results if you hand them enough of them. So I would hand them more. That was the whole plan, boiled down to the bone. Be right so many times that the truth stopped mattering and only the winning did. My father lay back down with his back to the fire, but he lay down slower than before, like a man who had felt his own floor shift half an inch beneath him. By morning, I stopped letting the team be a crowd and started building it into a machine. Not with speeches, with jobs. Everyone works better the moment they know the one thing that belongs to them. Grandpa Mark leads, I said. He reads the ground and the animals, and where he says do not step, nobody steps. Victor holds the circle. Anything that comes at us goes through him first, and everyone has now seen exactly why that is a poor idea for whatever is coming. Leah watches the grass and anything green that matters. If she says a plant is food, it is food. If she says do not touch, you grow old and gray never having touched it. And Bob, I said, you are on the food. Bob lit up like a holy man receiving his calling. He took it to mean he was now personally in charge of eating the food, and I had to spend a genuinely insulting amount of time explaining that guarding and rationing were not the same activity as chewing. Nova logged it all as further proof that humans were a deeply strange species. Even Grandpa Mark almost smiled, and he smiled about as often as the kingdom changed kings. The machine was ugly and loud and partly held together by a fat boy's appetite. But it was ours, and it ran. But it worked. The panic of 6 frightened people became something with a shape. Each one had a lane, and the lanes stopped fighting each other. Countercheck, Nova offered. With organization in place, supply secured, and one rival crippled, the probability of Ashford winning now sits near 24%. 24 from 4 in 2 days. I did not say it out loud, but I let myself feel it for exactly 1 breath before the forest reminded me what it charges for letting you stand here. Because the north had gone quiet, and quiet from the north was the worst sound the forest could make. Grandpa Mark stopped at midday with his hand raised. We all froze. He stood there listening to nothing for a long while, and the nothing stretched until it had a shape of its own. No birds, he said at last. Up north, no birds at all. Birds leave a place when it has gone bad. What happened up there? I asked, though I half knew the answer already. The old man crouched and drew a line in the dirt with a stick pointing north. Tree snakes, he said. They hang in the high branches and they drop. A whole nest of them holds the north reaches, and the only way to live through that ground is to never set a foot on it. I have skirted it my entire life. Stonehall went north, I said. Stonehall went north, he agreed, and said nothing more, because nothing more needed to be said. I felt Nova go still in the way I had already learned to dread. Then she spoke, very low. The sounds from the first day are consistent, she said. 8 people. 1 may have lived. The rest never came down off that ground. 8. The strongest team in the kingdom. The captain with the scar that the whole square had gone respectfully silent for. The forest had taken every one of them in a single morning and had not slowed down to do it. I looked at my own team. 6 living people the kingdom had laughed at on the way in. And for the first time, I understood that simply being alive was its own kind of victory, and that I was carrying something nobody else here could carry. I knew where the death was, and I could not tell a single soul how. Do not, I told Nova quietly. Count them out loud for me. I do not want the number. I just want every person here to stay off the north. Stonehall had walked into this forest on muscle and a famous name. We had walked in with a quiet girl, an old hunter, and a head full of borrowed arithmetic. Today, only one of those two teams still had every member breathing. That night, I could not sleep, and Nova was the reason. Mercanto will not try theft again, she said. Theft failed publicly, in front of your father and Victor both. Their leader is now playing for survival in the tournament, not advantage. His next move will be larger and dirtier. Probability, 91%. 91, I thought. After 96, 91 almost feels like a holiday. What kind of larger and dirtier? I asked. He cannot outbid your grass at the auction, she said. So he will make sure you never reach the auction at all. A team that does not arrive cannot win. He has watched us for 2 days. He knows we leave the forest soon, and he knows there is only one good way out. The path out. Of course. You do not have to outbid a rival, you can simply stop at the door. So now, I was not only guarding 3 sacks, I was guarding the road home for 6 people against a smiling man who had already decided that losing honestly was not anywhere on his list. The grass had made us a target. The way out was going to make us a battlefield. I lay there in the dark and built the next 2 days the way you build a wall, one stone at a time. Who walks where? Who carries what? Where Nova's eyes go and where Grandpa Mark's go. The cheat, plus the cast-offs, against an ambush we could already see coming. Wake me before first light, I told Nova. We are not walking out of this forest the way they expect us to. We are walking out the one way they cannot plan for. And somewhere 2 days ahead, on a narrow path I had not yet walked, the most expensive lesson of my life was already waiting on me. I did not know its price yet. I would learn it soon enough, and I would never stop paying it. We moved before the light was fully up, the way you do when something with a smile is waiting on the only road home. Nova steered us wide, and almost at once she stopped me cold. Ahead, she said. Stone bear. Sleeping. It dens in the rocks across our line, and it does not share its ground. There is a window while it sleeps, and the window is narrow. No noise, no quick moves. A stone bear. I had heard the name from Grandpa Mark and never once wanted to meet the thing attached to it. We could not fight it. A team that feeds a man to a bear does not reach the auction, and we had already agreed that brute force was for people with worse options than mine. So we crossed on Nova's clock. She counted the bear's breathing for me, slow and even, and told me exactly when to step and when to freeze. I passed it down the line in a whisper. Move. Stop. Move. Nova fed me the bear's rhythm like a drum beat. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. On the out-breath, we moved. On the in-breath, we became statues. I learned more about leading people in those 10 minutes than in the rest of the tournament put together. You do not shout. You give one small order at exactly the right second, and you make it impossible to get wrong. Bob, to his eternal credit, held his breath for a stretch so long I genuinely worried we would lose him to that instead of the bear. We crossed its ground one careful body at a time, and it never cracked an eye. 7 of us went in. 7 of us came out the far side, hearts slamming, every single one alive. No spear thrown, no blood spent. Just a boy, a clock in his head, and a held breath. That is what winning looks like when you are not allowed to win by being strong. We had barely stopped shaking when the cats found us again. 5 of them this time, the same scarred crew from the meadow, sitting square in our path, like they had booked the appointment. Bob groaned out loud. Grandpa Mark, of all people, laughed under his breath. The forest does not like debtors, the old man said. We took its grass and we paid it a fish. It remembers both. Feed them. I put down food without arguing the point. The lead cat ate, looked at me with that flat landlord stare, then turned and walked off into the trees. 2 steps. The glance back. The wait. Nobody questioned it now. 2 days ago, a cat leading the team would have started a small mutiny. Today, the whole group simply turned and followed a house cat's larger, meaner cousin into the deep woods. Because the last time we did exactly that, it made us rich. I want it on record, Nova said, that I continue to classify these animals as deeply unreliable partners. Noted, I said. Your objection is filed right next to the part where they doubled our fortune. Now walk. She went quiet, which from Nova was practically a heartfelt apology. The cat led us up a long slope, through ground that grew older and stranger with every step, the trees thickening into something far more ancient than anything near my district. Then it sat down at the foot of the largest living thing I had ever seen and waited for us to catch up to the idea. It was an oak, but calling it an oak is like calling the kingdom a house. It rose out of the slope wider than 3 men could reach around, so old its bark had gone gray as stone, and from a long split down its trunk ran a slow golden thread. Nova drew in a breath she did not technically need. Amber resin, she said. Ancient oak, easily 400 years old. This is not S-class, Kai. This is above it. And here is the part that matters most. So listen, it does not appear in any merchant registry I hold. Anywhere. What does that mean? I asked, though my skin had already started to prickle with the answer. It means no merchant alive carries a fixed price for it, she said. They cannot tell you it is worth this much and not a coin more, because there is no record to point a finger at. A thing with no price in the book is a thing where the seller gets to name the number. I stood at the foot of a 400-year-old tree and felt the entire tournament tilt our way. Quick math, the way I had started to live by. 3 sacks of blue grass. Now a cloth of amber resin worth more than the grass, the fish, and my whole district's last 10 years stacked together. And not one judge in the kingdom could haggle the price down, because not one of them had ever laid eyes on it. Bluegrass had been rare. This was rarer and better. It was unpriced. We were not bringing the judges a known thing to be checked against a chart. We were bringing them a thing the chart had never heard of. Probability of Ashword winning, Nova said, now climbing from 24 toward 34%. 34, from 4, in 2.5 days. The boy they had called a pitiful little sight was standing on a fortune the kingdom did not even own a word for yet. Bob crept up beside me and stared at the golden thread for a long moment. Can we call it very heavy gold? He asked with total sincerity. We will workshop the name, I told him, after we get it home alive. Getting it home alive started, like everything good lately, with Leah. Victor stepped up with a knife and went at the trunk the way men go at things, hard and direct. Leah caught his wrist before the blade landed. Not deep, she said. Her voice did not shake anymore. Cut it deep, and the tree closes the wound and the resin stops. For good. Take it shallow. Take only a little, and you can come back next season, and it is still giving. She was not just saving today's haul. She was thinking about a season we did not even know we would live to see. About a tree that could feed Ashword for years instead of one afternoon. The quiet herb girl had just outplanned every grown man on the team, myself included. Show us, I said. She showed us. Shallow, patient, a careful angle and depth, catching the gold in our cleanest cloth without scoring the deep wood. Victor copied her and cut that ancient tree as gently as a man trimming a sleeping child's hair, terrified of taking one drop too much. Grandpa Mark watched the girl work and gave her the highest praise he owned, which was no words at all, and one slow nod. Leah saw it. She stood a little straighter for the rest of that day. We had bluegrass. Now we had amber resin, and we had a third thing the kingdom valued even less than either, right up until the moment it could not afford to. We had Leah. We were folding the last of the resin into the cloth when the brush moved, and the smile walked out of it. The Mercanto leader stepped into the clearing alone, easy as ever, and his eyes went straight to the gold in our hands. I watched him price it. I watched him want it. He took one step toward us, and the team closed without me saying a single word. My father moved first, planting himself between the resin and the smile, shoulders squared. Victor next at his side, arms loose and ready. Grandpa Mark drew his old hunting knife, slow, and let it hang where everyone could see it. Even Bob stepped up, pale as milk, but there, a full circle of Ashword, wrapped around me and Leah and the gold. The smile flicked from face to face, doing its own arithmetic now, and clearly not enjoying the sum. Just passing by, he said lightly. Then pass on by, my father answered. 6 words. It was the most I had ever heard Ren say to a stranger, and every one of them was a wall. I felt something I had no name for, watching them stand there. 3 days ago, these same men had let a stranger call me a burden and studied their own boots. Now they stood between a knife and a 9-year-old without being asked twice. The gold had not just made us rich, it had made us a team. The Mercanto leader held it one more breath, then shrugged like none of it had mattered to begin with, and backed out of the clearing the way he had come. He could not take it here, not from a district that finally stood as one body. So he would do precisely what Nova had promised he would. He would wait for the narrow path, where a single circle could be split into single, killable pieces. Just passing by, I thought. The favorite phrase of every man caught wanting a thing he cannot take. That night we had the problem that wealth always brings. The richer you get, the more you have left to lose. Nova laid it out flat. The resin is heavy, she said. The grass is bulky. Loaded down, your team moves at half speed, and the only good way out runs through a narrow path Mercanto has had 2 days to prepare. The risk to the goods is now higher than the risk of an open fight, so the very thing that could win us everything was also the thing that could get us killed carrying it out. Of course, the forest did not hand a poor district a fortune without sewing a hook into each fold of it, so I counted what we were truly carrying out. 2 days of food, 3 sacks of grass, 1 cloth of gold the kingdom had no price for. 6 people I would not have traded for the whole crown, and one narrow path between all of us and the auction that could change every life I cared about. I sat by the low fire and built the route the only way I knew how. Not who is strongest, who walks where, what we carry, and what we are willing to drop and run. Where Nova's eyes go, where Grandpa Mark's go, where exactly the smile will be waiting in the dark. Across the fire, the old man was sharpening that hunting knife, slow and even, watching me work it out stone by stone. He caught my eye once and almost smiled, the way he had back at the river. "Whatever you are cooking, boy," he said quietly, "I am in it." I did not know yet how much those 5 words were going to cost him. I just nodded and bent back over the path that would carry us home, and tried very hard not to think about how narrow it was. Tomorrow we would walk out of the forest. One of us would not. We left at first light, loaded and slow, and for 1 whole hour the forest let us believe we might simply walk out of it. Then Nova went sharp in my head. "Stop," she said. "The path ahead of you. Listen through me." I halted the line with a raised hand. Through Nova's ears I caught what my own never would have. The narrow trail out ran between 2 rises, and up in the trees above it, men were breathing. Bowstrings creaked. Down on the ground, just under the leaves, lay the wrong kind of straight line. "Archers above the trail," Nova said. "Traps set on the ground. 3 men, perhaps 4. This is the ambush." The smile placed it exactly where the path forces you into single file. There is no way through it as a group carrying this much weight. I crouched and pulled Grandpa Mark and Victor in close, only them, the way I had with the thieves. I told them what was waiting, plain and fast. "How do you know?" Grandpa Mark asked. Not doubting. Just asking. The way the old ask the young when the young keep turning out right. "I know," I said. That was all I had. I could not tell him a voice from a fallen star was counting bowmen in the branches for me. I could only ask him to bet his life on the word of a 9-year-old. One more time, for the highest stake there was. Grandpa Mark looked at me a long moment. Then he looked at the trail, the trees, the 2 rises, with 40 years of forest behind his eyes, and I watched him arrive at the exact answer Nova had, by a road that did not need her at all. He set down his pack. "There is only one way through a trap like that," the old man said quietly. "Somebody has to be the noise. One man walks the trail loud and slow and pulls every eye and every arrow, while the rest go around through the bog with the goods." The bog. Nova had it on the map, west of the trail, slow and ugly and quiet. A man could lead the team through it while the archers were busy with something louder. "I will go on the trail," I said. "I am the smallest. I am the hardest to hit." "No." Grandpa Mark did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "You carry the goods, boy. You are the only one who knows what to do with them once you are out. Lose you, and we win the forest and lose everything that comes after it. That is a bad trade." "Then me," Victor said. "I am the biggest. I can take a few arrows." "No," said the old man again. "You carry the sacks. You are strong, and the bog is deep, and the resin cannot get wet." He said it gently, but it was already decided, and every one of us heard the door shut on it. He picked up his hunting knife, looked at it, and slid it back into his belt. He would not need it where he was going. That, more than any words, was the moment I truly understood what he was doing. "I am 60 years old," he said, looking only at me. 40 of them spent in this forest. I know this trail better than the men sitting over it ever will. I will give them the loudest old fool they have ever chased." He almost smiled. "You give my district a future? That is a fair trade. It might be the best one I ever made." I wanted to argue. I had 100 clever words and a voice in my head that could find 100 more, and not one of them moved the arithmetic an inch. He was right. It was the right call, and the right call was going to take him from us. He crouched down to my level, the way Victor had once done, and put one rough hand on my head. "You see this forest the way I see it," he said. "Maybe better than I ever did. Lead them, Kai. Do not look back at me. Look forward, where they are going." Then he stood, picked up a long stick to make himself sound like a man twice his size, and walked toward the trail without waiting for anyone's permission, because he had stopped needing it. We went into the bog the instant the first shout went up. Grandpa Mark hit the trail loud, cracking branches, bellowing like a man who had lost his whole team and most of his mind along with it. Up in the trees, the archers swung toward the noise, exactly as he meant them to. An arrow buried itself in a trunk beside his head. He laughed at it, loud, and kept moving, pulling them deeper away from us. We moved the other way, into the bog, up to our knees in black water, Victor holding the sacks above his head, Leah holding the resin cloth high and dry like it was the most precious thing in the world, because by then it was. Bob slipped, and I caught him by the collar. Nobody spoke. Nobody could have. Nova guided every step. Here. Not there. That is deep. Here. Now. She walked us through that swamp, one safe footfall at a time, while behind us the old man made enough noise for 10 men. The arrows kept flying. The shouting moved off. We were almost across, mud to our waists, and the trail gone quiet behind us, when Nova spoke again. She did not say it the way she said numbers. Her voice came out low and slow, and for the first time since I met her, something underneath it was not steady. Grandpa Mark is no longer moving, she said. I stopped in the black water. The whole world slid very far away. Behind us, the forest had gone silent, and I understood that the silence was the answer to a question I had not let myself ask out loud. I did not cry. Not then. There was a team in a bog, goods to carry, and a smile somewhere counting our heads. So I did the thing the old man told me to do. I looked forward. My father waited up beside me. He did not say one word. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder, the same shoulder he had turned me away by on the square, and he gripped it once, hard. It was the first time in my life my father ever touched me like I was a man and not a problem to be managed. We carry it the rest of the way, I said, and my voice did not shake, because I would not allow it to. He led us out. We do not waste it. We came out of the forest into the gathering clearing in the late light, soaked to the chest, 6 of us where there had been 7. The other teams were already there. Mercanto, dry and smiling, pretending the ambush on the trail had been someone else's plan entirely. Aram, clean and ordered, Sylvia at their head without a smudge on her. And then, out of the north, one more figure stepped from the trees. The Stonehall captain, alone. The scar on his face, an empty basket in his hands, and nothing else at all. No team, no goods. He walked to the judge's table, set the empty basket down on it, and just stood there. Where is your team? A judge asked him. They did not come out, the captain said. That was the whole of it. Then he sat down on the ground, right where he stood, and looked at nothing. Nobody laughed. Even Mercanto's smile went thin. The strongest team in the kingdom had walked into that forest 8 men strong, and one of them came back out, holding an empty basket. The entire clearing understood at once exactly what the forest charged, and what kind of luck it had taken to come out of it whole. Bob, who had a joke for everything, who had wanted to name the resin very heavy gold, did not say a single word. He stood there with the mud drying on his face, and tears cutting clean lines down through it. That, more than anything, told me how far we had come, and what it had cost us to get here. We had come out with our goods. We had come out without the man who got us out. I set the resin down at my feet and made myself stand up straight because the old man had told me to look forward, and forward was the judge's table. A judge waved us up. Ashward, last as always, soaked through and grim. He looked at our catch first, the fish and the meat, and frowned, because it should have been 3 days rotten, and it plainly was not. Leah had packed all of it in a gray moss she gathered along the way. Quietly, the way she did everything. A natural preservative. The judge prodded the meat, sniffed it, and raised an eyebrow. This should be spoiled, he said. It is wrapped in gray moss root, Leah said, stepping up before her nerve could fail her. It keeps for 3 days, sometimes 4. I know this one. I found it myself. The judge made a note. One more thing the kingdom had not known, taught to it by a quiet girl from the poorest district in it. Then he saw the blue grass and went still. Then I unwrapped the resin, and the whole table went still along with him. He lifted the cloth, held the gold up to the failing light, and turned it over twice in his hands. What is this? He asked. Amber resin, I said, from an ancient oak, 400 years old, in our forest. It is not in the registry, the judge said slowly. There is no entry anywhere for this. There it was. The same wall that would rise against us again and again in the months to come, raised for the very first time. I gave it the answer I would end up giving 100 more times, and I gave it steady, with the old man's voice still in my spine. It is now, I said. The judge looked from the gold, to the soaked child holding it, to the empty Stonehall basket, and he wrote down something that changed the price of my entire life. Across the clearing, Sylvia turned her head and looked at me for the first time as if I were a person and not a punchline. That night, camped at the edge of the auction grounds, I felt eyes on me that did not belong to Mercanto. Sylvia, Nova said quietly. She has been watching you since the clearing. She changed her route 3 times today for no reason except to pass near us. She saw how you walked out of that forest, as if you knew it better than grown men did. She cannot understand it, and she will not let that stand. Let her watch, I said. There is nothing to see except a tired boy. There is more, Nova said. She is the sharpest mind in this tournament after yours. Be careful with her. She is dangerous, and she is curious, and curious is worse. I looked across the dark at the white-haired girl who had called my district a pitiful little sight 3 days and 1 whole lifetime ago. She was not laughing now. She was studying me. Good, I thought. Let her study. Tomorrow she would find out exactly what the studying was worth. Nova laid out the auction for me one last time before I slept. Aurum will go first, she said. They will set a high price and ride the crowd's excitement. Mercanto will flood the floor with sheer volume, so we go last. We come out when the floor is tired of everything it has already seen, and we set down the one thing no one in the kingdom has ever owned. 34%, she added. With the resin and played correctly, tomorrow that number becomes a great deal larger. I shut my eyes and saw an old man walking loud down a narrow trail so a boy could carry gold out of a forest. Tomorrow I would turn it into the very thing he had traded his life for. A future for the people who laughed at us. We go last, and we do not waste a single drop of it. The auction grounds were the exact opposite of the forest. Bright cloth, polished tables, foreign merchants in coats worth more than my whole street, and a crowd that had come to watch money change hands. Mercanto went early and went loud. They piled their table high, volume over quality, and the leader worked the crowd with that wide smile. But Nova caught what the eye missed. A third of their meat has turned, she said. They are selling quickly, so the buyers cannot look closely. Then came Aurum, and Aurum was a different thing entirely. Clean, sorted, every item perfect, laid out like a banquet for a king. Sylvia named each piece with the flat confidence of a girl who had done this 7 years running and never once lost. Quality speaks louder than sacks, she said to the floor, not even glancing toward Mercanto. The crowd ate it up. The number on Aurum's side of the board climbed high, and the applause came easily. Here is the trap of a place like that. The board was not just coins, it was the patent, the tax-free shop, the title of First District, 10 whole years of a different life. Every number that climbed for Aurum was a number climbing away from us, and the crowd had already decided the ending in her favor. We must beat that by a wide margin, Nova told me. On volume alone, we cannot. On quality, it would be close. We win on the one thing they do not have and cannot get. I looked down the soaked, grim line of my district waiting at the back. Mud still on our boots. Bob's eyes still red. Leah holding the resin cloth in both arms, like she was carrying the old man himself out of that forest one more time. Last, I murmured. We go last. Let them spend the whole floor's attention first. Then we spend ours. When they finally called Ashward up, the smirk started before we even reached the table. We laid out the catch first. Fish and meat, 3 days old and somehow still fresh. The nearest merchant reached for it expecting the worst, and stopped halfway. Why is this not spoiled? He asked. He lifted a piece, turned it, sniffed it twice. This is 3 days old. It should be rotten through. Gray moss root, I said, and nodded to Leah. She wraps the catch in it. It keeps 3 days, sometimes 4. The merchant called another merchant over. The second called a third. 3 of them now, prodding our fish, muttering about a preservative none of their houses stocked, firing questions at Leah. And Leah, chin up and voice steady, answered every single one. The quiet girl from the lower district was holding court with foreign traders twice her father's age. I want it written down somewhere, what that looked like. A girl who 3 days ago would not finish a sentence above a whisper, explaining to a southern trade house exactly why their stock spoiled and hers did not. Nobody in that crowd was laughing at the lower district now. They were taking notes. That was the first hook set. Then the bluegrass came out and the muttering turned sharp. S-class, clean cut, more of it than Aurum had brought to the floor. The number on our side of the board began to climb, past Mercanto, closing fast on Aurum, and the smirks out in the crowd quietly went to die. Count it, Nova said. 1 merchant at our table became 3. 3 became 6. Curiosity is turning into price. Hold the resin back. Let them get good and hungry first. So I held the resin. Bob leaned over and whispered with total gravity that the meat did not smell heroic, but it was clearly very convincing. And for the first time since the bog, I almost smiled. 6 merchants crowded our table now, and we had not even shown them the gold yet. That was the moment Sylvia stepped in to stop us cold. She came to the judges, calm and precise, and laid down the blade she had been sharpening since the clearing. The amber resin is not listed in any registry, she said. It has no established price. A sale with no fixed value cannot be counted toward the tournament. The lot should be ruled void. It was a good attack. Quiet, legal, aimed at the exact center of our biggest piece. The crowd murmured. A few merchants nodded along. Without the resin, our number slid back under Arum's, and the white-haired girl knew it down to the coin. 3 days earlier, that would have finished us. But I had a voice in my head that had read every merchant record it carried, and I had learned a hard lesson in the forest about answering with facts instead of pleading. Nova fed me the name. Southern Delegation, second table, the one in the green coat. He has paid for this before. I turned to him, the old Southern merchant, and asked it plainly, loud enough that the whole floor caught it. Have you ever paid for amber resin from an ancient oak? The old man blinked, startled to be addressed by a soaked child. Then he answered honestly, because honesty was his entire trade. Yes, he said, 20 years ago, once. And the price then was higher than anything sitting on that board today. Silence. Real silence, the kind that costs the other side something. Sylvia's argument was not refuted. It simply stopped existing, killed clean by one old man with a long memory. I did not gloat. I just looked at Sylvia and let the quiet do the work, the same way she had done it to me on the square. Her face did not crack, but she went still, and from Sylvia, still was worth more than any amount of applause. Nova had handed me one old man's memory, and one old man's memory had just outweighed 7 straight years of Sylvia's victories. The sharpest mind in the tournament had walked square into a wall she never saw coming, and the wall was nothing but a fact. The Southern merchant was not finished. He came down off his bench, crossed to our table, and held one careful hand near the gold without touching it, the way a man approaches something holy. I have not seen this in 20 years, he said. To the whole floor now. There is no price for it because no one has had any to price. You do not weigh this against a chart. You weigh it against the plain fact that nobody else in the world is holding a single drop. Nova said it in my head at the very same moment he said it aloud, and the two of them together turned the whole room. This is no longer a product, she told me. It is a new category. And the person who owns the only example of a category owns the category itself. The other merchants understood it all at once. This was not a lot to be measured against Orum's perfect inventory. This was the rarest thing on the grounds, held by the team the kingdom had laughed at on the way in. They started bidding against each other, not against a price, because there was no price. There was only how badly each of them wanted to be the one who walked away with it. Numbers I had never heard said out loud started flying across the floor. A house from the east called a figure. A southern house topped it. Somebody doubled it again just to stay in the room. Each shout was more gold than Ashward had seen in a generation, and they were shouting it over a cloth a dead man had carried out of a swamp. The number on Ashward's side of the board jumped, then jumped again. It passed Arum, and it kept on climbing. Probability of Ashward winning, Nova said, now climbing from 34 toward 89%. 89. I stood there with mud on my boots and an old man's gold on the table, and watched the kingdom set a price on the thing he had died carrying out. Leah was crying quietly beside me. So was I realized, and I did not bother to stop it. The land they had called a pitiful little sight had just named its own worth out loud, and the entire floor was reaching for its purse. At the edge of the grounds, the Ston Hall captain watched it all from the dirt, the empty basket still beside him. He did not bid. He just watched the poorest district outvalue the whole floor, and something in that scarred face, dead since the clearing, flickered once. The smile did not care for 89%. The Mercanto leader shoved up off his bench because a drowning man grabs at anything, and he grabbed the only thing left in reach. He pointed one ringed finger straight at me. A child cannot be party to a deal of this size, he announced to the floor. He is 9 years old. He cannot hold a patent. He cannot sign a contract. He cannot be the seller of record. By the law, none of this counts. The lot belongs to a boy, and a boy can hold nothing, so the lot is worth nothing. And just like that, the square came roaring back. They brought a child. A pitiful little sight. The same wound, dressed up now in a merchant's law, swung at me in front of the same kind of grinning crowd. For half a breath, I was 9 years old in a dusty yard again, with a wooden sword coming for my head and not one adult stepping in. But I was not in a dusty yard. I was on a floor I had just turned upside down, with a fortune on the board, and 6 people behind me who had finally stopped staring at their own boots. The wound was the same one. The boy holding it was not. He is correct on the law, Nova said quietly. The deals must belong to an adult of record. You need someone to claim them as his own. Now Kai, I knew exactly who. I had known since the bog, since a heavy hand gripped my shoulder once and said nothing at all. I just did not know whether he would do it here, out loud, in front of the whole kingdom that had taught him to be ashamed of me. Do not help him, Nova said softly, reading the impulse before I had it. This one has to be his. If you put the words in his mouth, it stays your victory and not his. Let him reach it alone. I turned to find my father. Ren was already moving. He stepped out of the ashward line, past me, up to the judge's table, and he did not look small doing it. The crowd went quiet at the sheer size of him and the set of his jaw. I am Ren of Ashward, he said, captain of this team, and I have something to say about who made these deals. The whole floor leaned in. Mercanto's smile flickered at the edges, and I held my breath, because everything we had bled for in that forest now balanced on whatever the quietest man in Ashward was about to say in front of the world. The whole floor waited on my father, and my father took his time, because some men only speak when it matters, and this mattered. I am Ren of Ashward, he said again, captain, and every deal you watched made on this floor, every cut of grass and every drop of resin was made on the counsel of my advisor. He paused. My advisor is my son. The Mercanto leader actually laughed. Your advisor is a child, he said. There is no law, my father answered, that puts an age on an advisor. A captain takes counsel from whoever is wisest in his team. Mine happens to be 9. He turned to the judges. Challenge my right to name my own advisor if you can find me the law that allows it. They could not. The judges put their heads together and came back with nothing because there was nothing to find. A captain of record had made the deals. His advisor's age was his own business and no one else's. I stood there while my father, the man who 3 days ago turned me out of the planning circle and told me not to get in the way, planted himself in front of the whole kingdom and called me his advisor, out loud, where every soul who had heard a pitiful little sight could now hear this instead. Out in the crowd I found the neighbor, the grown man who had gone red on the square and called out that I was not really one of them, just a boy to keep an eye on. He was not red now. He was studying the ground while a king's floor called me an advisor, and for once it was his turn to look at his own boots. Advisor. It sounded far too grown for a boy with bogs still drying in his boots. I decided I could learn to live with it. Nova was quiet a moment. He reached it on his own, she said. I told you to let him. Was I right? You were right, I admitted. I am keeping a list, she said, of the times I am right, for later use. The judges were not finished, and what came next, Mercanto had earned with his own 2 hands. The head judge stood and read it to the floor. During the survival phase, 2 members of the Mercanto team were caught attempting to steal goods belonging to Ashward, witnessed by members of 2 districts. Further, the leader of Mercanto brought a false complaint to this floor in an attempt to void a lawful sale by a rival. He let it sit. The grounds had gone perfectly silent. This is bad faith competition, the judge said. Under the rules of the tournament, the district of Mercanto is disqualified. All of its lots are struck. Its standing is void. I watched the smile go. It did not crack all at once. It came apart slowly, piece by piece, the way a thing dies when it has finally run clean out of tricks, until all that was left on his face was a man who had bet his entire hand on the idea that nobody would ever dare to check him. He looked at me one last time across the floor, not smiling now. He had walked in 3 days ago as the charming favorite, the one the crowd adored, and he was walking out a cheat with empty hands. You did this, he said, quiet, almost wondering at it. No, I told him, and I meant it. You stole our grass and you lied to the judges. I only made sure both of those things happened where people could see them. That is the whole trick. I never once beat you. I let you beat yourself in public. Mercanto turned and walked off the floor, and the same crowd that had cheered him on the first day did not make a single sound. 3 days ago, that smile had held a whole crowd in its hand. Now the crowd watched it leave and said nothing at all, and silence from people who used to love you is the loudest verdict there is. Then it was only us and Orem left on the board, and one of those 2 numbers was higher than the other. The head judge read the final tally. Orem, second. He let it land. Ashward, first. By the value of a category the kingdom had never owned before today. For 3 full seconds, the auction grounds stayed silent. The poorest district, the joke. The team that walked in last to a laugh and a shout of try not to get lost. First, then the crowd broke. Not politely. All at once a roar, the kind that had gone to Orem and Stonehall on the first day, and never once, not ever, to us. My mother, somewhere near the front, pressed both hands over her mouth and could not make them come down. Victor sat down right where he stood, like his legs had finished their work and simply quit. Bob howled and grabbed Leah, and Leah, the girl nobody ever looked at, was being lifted off her feet by a crowd that suddenly knew her name. What do you feel? Nova asked me. Genuine. Not a reading. A real question. I stood in the middle of all of it and tried to find the word. I do not know what it is called, I said. Neither do I, Nova said softly. It is the first time for me as well. And underneath the roar, I felt the price of it too. An old man walking loud down a trail, a scarred captain with an empty basket. We had not bought this with grass and gold. We had bought it with them. So I let the crowd cheer, and I held that part quietly, because the old man had told me to look forward, and forward was full of people finally saying our name like it meant something. I found the neighbor again. He had shoved his way to the front now, cheering louder than anyone, shouting that Ashward was his district, that he had always known. People do that. The same mouth that disowns you while you are a joke will claim you the moment you are a victory. I let him cheer. The cheering itself was the apology, and it was the only one I needed from him. Later, when the noise had thinned, Sylvia found me at the edge of all of it. She did not bring her team. She came alone, straight-backed, and stood in front of me like a girl settling a debt she did not enjoy owing. I sent men to that trail, she said. The narrow one, the only way out. She watched my face as she said it. You knew they would be there. You walked your whole team around it, through the bog. A child does not do that. I did not answer. There was no answer that did not cost more than I could spend. The old man, she said. The one who is not standing with you now. I said nothing. She read the silence correctly, and for one moment something in her face was almost gentle. He was a good hunter, I said at last. He was, she agreed. Then she straightened, and she said the thing I had carried since the square. The sentence I had folded up small and kept warm for 3 days. You won fairly, she said. Ashward earned it. 4 words and a name. The exact opposite of a pitiful little sight, said in the same quiet voice, on the same hard ground. I had dragged that sentence the whole way out of her, and it tasted every bit as sweet as I had promised myself it would. She turned to go. Sylvia, I said. She stopped, not looking back. Next time, I said, a wager. A long pause. Then, just before she walked away, the corner of her mouth moved. The smallest thing. Almost nothing at all. Almost a smile. We will see, she said, and was gone. She is going to be a problem, Nova said, watching her go. The good kind, I said. The kind that pushes back. Then she is the most dangerous kind, Nova said, because you respect those, and respect is what makes you careless. The last thing that day was the biggest, and it arrived with a crown on it. The king himself came to the grounds to seal the result, because the tournament decided the kingdom's trade for 10 years. And a king does not send a clerk for that. He was older than I had pictured, and his eyes did not miss very much. Ashward, he said, reading the result like he wanted to be certain of it. The lowest district. He looked at our muddy line, then at the gold still sitting on the table, and something moved behind his eyes that I would spend the coming months learning to read. There are men, he said, almost to himself, who will not enjoy seeing the lowest district hold the highest right. He did not name them. He did not need to. Be ready for them, advisor. I bowed, because a smart boy bows when a king calls him by the title his father just won him. By the right of this tournament, he declared, the district of Ashward holds the royal trade patent for 10 years, a shop in the center of the kingdom free of all tax, and the title of First District. 10 years, a shop in the center, from a district that had owned exactly none of those 3 things that very morning. The arithmetic of my whole life, rearranging itself one more time, in front of a king. My father stood straighter than I had ever seen him stand. He leaned down close, so only I could hear it. How do you know, he asked quietly, the things that you know? I cannot tell you yet, I said. The same wall, the same lie. But this time I set 1 stone on top of it. When I can, you will be the very first. He nodded, slow, and did not push. A king had just made us First District. My father had decided he could wait for the rest. That night, I sat on the edge of everything we had won and asked Nova the only question I had left. The next tournament, I said, next year? What are our odds now? Unknown, she said. No data. You always have a number, I said. You had 4% before I had even found you in the dirt. I had 4% because everything was exactly as it had always been, she said. Poor district, weak team, a predictable world. You spent 3 days breaking every variable I used to build that number. I cannot calculate the odds of a thing that no longer behaves the way the records insist it should. You made yourself unpredictable. Congratulations, I suppose. I laughed. The first real laugh since the bog. So we go from 4% to no data. That is either the best or the worst progress report I have ever received. It is both, Nova said. From 4% to no data in 3 days, and the cost of it was 1 good man and most of what was left of my childhood. The old me would have called that a bad trade and gone home to be furniture. The new me looked at a shop in the center of the kingdom and started counting everything we could build on top of it. Then we start again, I told her. We took a forest. Next, we take everything that comes after it. But here is the thing, nobody warns you about winning a tournament. You do not get to sit and enjoy it. The moment you stop being a joke, you start being a threat, and threats get visitors. Mine were already on their way, in fine coats, carrying documents, with smiles that would make mercantos look honest. I just did not know it yet. That night I sat with my team and my mother and a voice in my head that had finally run clean out of numbers, and for one evening I let myself simply be a boy who had won. It turned out to be the last quiet evening I would get for a very long time. The shop sat in the center of the kingdom, on a street where the stones were swept and the air did not smell like my district. Ours now. The patent came with a royal seal pressed into red wax, and the key was iron and older than my father. We walked in like people waiting to be told they had the wrong address. The other districts watched us go. Aurum watched from across the square, Sylvia somewhere among them, measuring as always. Inside it was empty and dusty and completely ours. Victor was already pacing it off, heel to toe, counting the length of the walls under his breath, the way a man does when he has decided a thing is finally real. Leah laid both hands flat on the back wall, like she was checking whether it would hold. Floor area is sufficient for a front counter, 2 storage rooms, and a working bench, Nova began. Projected daily revenue at conservative pricing. Not now, Nova, I said. I am simply noting the margins. Not now. Let them have a minute. We had spent our whole lives being told exactly where we were allowed to stand. Let my district stand in the middle of the kingdom, in a place that belonged to us, and feel it for 1 minute before we turned it into a column of numbers. Nova went quiet. 1 minute, she said. Then we work. 1 minute, I agreed, and we stood in our own shop and breathed. Through the front window, I could see the rest of the kingdom going about its business, the merchants and the clerks and the fine coats. None of them used to a lower district face owning a door on their street. A few of them slowed to stare. Let them. We were not the help anymore. We were the address. The minute ended and the arguing began, which is how I knew we were truly a business now. Victor wanted to fill the shelves fast and sell everything we had while the kingdom was still excited about us. Move it quick, he said. Strike while they still care. No. Leah, who 6 days ago would not speak above a whisper, planted herself in front of a man twice her size. Sell bad goods fast, she said, and tomorrow nobody comes back. Sell good goods slow, and they come back for the rest of their lives. We hold the quality. We turn away anything that is not right. Victor opened his mouth to win the argument by being older and louder. Then he closed it again, because she was right and he knew it. And Victor had learned in the forest that being older was not the same thing as being right. Fine, he said, a little wounded, quality. He muttered something about being managed by children and went back to measuring shelves, growing quieter with each one. So the lanes formed on their own, the way they had in the forest. Victor ran the floor and the building. Leah ruled the quality and the stock, and what she called good was good. Bob volunteered for security, by which he once again meant eating, and I once again had to walk him through the difference. Quick count of what we had become. 6 people, 1 shop, 10 years of patent, and a quality rule enforced by a girl who used to flinch at the sound of her own voice. From the back of the bottom to an address in the center in the space of a single week. It was loud, and it was ours, and it worked. For about a day. They came on the second morning, and they did not kick in the door. That was the first thing I learned about real power. It knocks politely. 3 men in coats finer than anything else in the kingdom center. Soft-spoken, smiling the way men smile when they have already decided how the conversation ends. They congratulated us on our victory. They admired the shop. They were warmth itself. Then the lead one set a document on our new counter, gently, like a gift. The amber resin, he said, was harvested in the eastern sector of the royal forest. That sector falls under a charter held by the Merchant Guild for the past 30 years. All resources taken from it belong to the guild. He tapped the paper once. We will of course be filing in the royal arbitration to recover what is ours. We so wanted to tell you in person first. The smiles never moved. The eyes never warmed. I had met a smiling enemy before. Mercanto smiled to charm a crowd. These 3 smiled because they did not consider the outcome to be in any doubt. To them, this was not a fight. It was a formality, a polite stop on the way to collecting a thing they had always assumed was theirs. Nova was fast and quiet. This is a legal attack, she said, not theft. Worse than theft. The charter may be entirely real. These are not men who lose in a forest. These are men who win in a room before you have even arrived in it. I looked at the three coats and understood that Mercanto had been a thug with a knife. This was something else entirely. It did not want to steal the resin. It wanted to prove the resin had never been ours to begin with a 30-year-old piece of paper in front of a king. We had been handed a shop one day ago, and someone was already at the counter, smiling, reaching for the floor underneath it. 3 days earlier, a thing like this would have finished us. But I had learned in a forest that you do not flinch at the first paper an enemy lays on the table. You read it. Then you set a paper of your own down beside it. I am only 9, I said pleasantly, so help me understand it. Your charter gives the guild the resources of the eastern sector. The tournament gave every district the right to take resources from the royal forest during the 3 days. Which of those two came first? And which one does the king's own tournament answer to? The lead man's smile thinned by exactly 1 degree. He had not expected the child to read. So here is what we will do, I said. If your charter truly outranks the king's tournament, we will pay you for the resin, every last coin. But if it does not, you will withdraw your claim and acknowledge our patent, in writing, in front of the arbitration. Either way, we settle it in the open. Not at my counter, where only you happen to hold a copy of the rules. I was not asking. A poor district was setting terms to a monopoly, and the three coats heard every word of it. We will see you at the arbitration, the lead man said, still perfectly smooth, and they filed out as politely as they had come in. The door shut behind them. I let out the breath I had been holding the whole time. That, Nova said, was either brilliant or the single worst mistake of your short life. Probably both, I said. Now get me everything you have on charters. That night the shop turned into a war room built out of paper. Nova read me the charter line by line, while I spread documents across our new counter, hunting for the crack in 30 years of guild law. It was slow going. The guild wrote its papers to be slow on purpose, so that an ordinary man would give up long before he found the hole in them. My father did not understand a single word of it. He sat across the counter anyway, watching me work, not leaving, exactly the way he had not left the bog. Around midnight he stood, disappeared into the back, and came back carrying food. He set it down in front of me without a word. My father had cooked. For me. He had never once done that in my life. He was not a man who knew how to say the thing, so he made the thing instead, and slid it across a counter at midnight to a boy buried in a monopoly's paperwork. Eat, he said. Then go back to arguing with the paper. I ate. It was not good. It was the best meal I have ever had in my life. And I have never told him that, because some things you simply keep. Across the counter, the man who had once turned me away on a square sat guarding his son against an enemy he could not even see, with the only weapon he owned, which was simply refusing to leave. It was almost dawn when Nova found it. There, she said, sharp. Read this clause again. The charter grants the guild the resources of the eastern sector, but the tournament code, the king's own law, carries a separate provision. Participants of the tournament hold free access to the resources of the royal forest for the duration of the contest. 3 days. It is an exception written into the law itself. I read it twice. The guild owned the sector. But for 3 days, the king's own tournament had thrown that sector open to every district, by a law that outranked any charter, because a king's contest does not answer to a merchant's paper. The resin was taken during those 3 days, I said slowly, by a participant. Inside the window, the law itself opened. Yes, Nova said. The argument exists. It is real. But, I said. There is always a but. But a clause is only ink on a page until someone makes it true in front of the arbitration, she said. You need a witness who can speak to the tournament code with an authority the judges cannot wave away. And you need the whole thing public, so the guild cannot settle it quietly in a room where only their copy of the rules exists. A document alone, they can bury. A document plus a public process plus the right witness they cannot. The right witness. Someone who knew the tournament code cold, who carried real weight, who had no reason to love the guild and every reason to stand beside the district that walked out of that forest with its honor intact. I knew exactly who, and the asking of it was going to be the hardest thing I had done since the bog, because the man I needed had just lost his entire team in that same forest, and I was about to walk straight up to his grief and ask him for a favor. But that was the whole trick of it, and I understood that much even then. The guild expected a poor district to fold quietly in a room stacked with their paper. So I would do the one thing they could never file away. I would fill that room with witnesses and make their 30-year charter argue against the entire kingdom. The first thing I did was go to the man I least wanted to disturb. The Stonehall captain had stayed on after the tournament in a cheap room because a man with no team has nowhere to be. I found him there and did not waste his time pretending I had come for any other reason. The guild is trying to take the resin, I said. They claim the law is on their side. I think the tournament code is on mine. You know that code better than any man alive. I need you to say so, out loud, in front of the arbitration. He looked at me a long time, the scar pale in the dim light of that little room. You want a favor? He said, from the man who lost everything in the same forest that made you first district. Yes, I said. I would not insult him by dressing it up. I came out of that forest with my team because I was lucky and careful, and because somebody died to make it so. You came out alone. I am not going to pretend any of that is fair. I am asking anyway, because you are the only one who can do this, and because the guild deserves to lose it. Something moved in his face. He was quiet a long while. Then he said, your district was the only team that walked out of that forest with its honor still on it. He stood. I will speak. Not for you. For the code. And because those smiling men have never lost a single thing in their lives, and I would dearly like to watch them start. One witness secured. Now I needed all the rest. The foreign merchants were easier. I sent word to the southern delegation with one simple truth. If the guild voids my resin, the contracts you signed to buy it vanish right along with it. Their interest was not kindness. It was arithmetic, and arithmetic I could count on. By the end of the week, I had merchants, a captain, and a whole lower district that could tell a truth from a lie with its own hands. The guild had a charter and a lawyer. I liked the look of my pile better. The guild did not wait for the arbitration to fight. They opened a second front while I was still gathering allies, and they opened it exactly where I was not looking. A few days into running the shop, the customers began to thin. Then a man I did not know came to the counter, leaned in, and asked me almost kindly whether it was true. True that what? I asked. That your goods are not natural, he said. People are saying the grass that will not die, the meat that does not spoil. They say it is not honest work. They are calling it dark magic, and saying the lower district feeds on it. Nova was cold. There it is, she said. They cannot beat the resin in a court yet, so they are poisoning the well around it instead. If the kingdom decides your goods are cursed, no ruling can save you. A frightened customer never reads a charter. It was clever, and it was ugly, and it was aimed with care. They could not call me a thief the way they had with Mercanto, so they called me something older and worse, something a poor district had been called before. Strange, unnatural, not to be trusted near decent people, dark magic, if they only knew how close and how wrong they had landed. The strangest thing in my whole shop was a voice in my head from a fallen star, and it could not make a single blade of grass grow if its life depended on it. The rumor spread the way rumors always do, faster than any truth and far cheaper. By the second day, the line outside our shop had thinned to almost nothing, and I could feel the old laughter waiting to come back, wearing fear as its new coat. So I did the one thing the guild could not possibly have wanted. I opened the door wider. Come in, I told the next customer who hesitated at the threshold. Come into the back. See exactly how it is done. We hide nothing here. And then I handed the whole thing to Leah, because the rumor was about her craft, and the answer to it was also her. Leah set up a table in the back room and taught. Not me, not Victor. A girl from the lower district showing her own neighbors how to tell a real thing from a false one with their own two hands. This grass, she said, holding up a stalk. Cut high, it stays blue. The fakes the peddlers sell you are cut cheap and dyed, and the sap runs white. Press it and look. White sap is a lie. She pressed it. The neighbors leaned in close. If a man tells you it is magic, she said, he is only hoping you will not press it yourself. She taught them the moss. She taught them the resin. She gave away the very knowledge that made us special, and I let her do it because Nova had been right about almost everything except this one thing. You do not protect knowledge by hiding it. A secret can be called witchcraft. A skill the whole street can do with its own hands cannot. Bob, with total gravity, sniffed every sample on the table to demonstrate proper technique and became a cautionary example instead, and the back room laughed for the first time in days. The fear thinned out as the people learned, because it is very hard to stay afraid of a thing you have just done yourself. By the end of the week, half the lower district could spot a fake faster than a guild peddler could sell one. The rumor died in public, and it died in the mouth of an old woman I will never forget. A guild man, one of the soft-coated ones, came through the market a few days later, talking loudly to anyone who would listen about the unnatural goods from the lower district and the dangers of dark magic loose in the center of the kingdom. He picked the wrong market. An old woman, bent and gray, the kind who has bought food for 60 years and been cheated for 50 of them, turned around with a bundle of our bluegrass in her hand. If it is magic, she said, loud enough for the whole square to hear, Then explain one thing to me. She held up the grass. This boy's people taught me to press the stalk and check the sap. I checked it myself, with these hands. It is real. Then she pointed her chin at him. So tell me, if it is dark magic, why am I the one who can spot your fakes now, and not you? The market laughed. Not at us. At him. The guildman's mouth opened and shut, and he had nothing in it, because you cannot argue a woman out of a thing she has done with her own hands. Probability of winning the arbitration, Nova said, climbing from 32 towards 76%. The rumor is, statistically, dead. Let it lie there a while longer, I said. I want it good and cold before the guild thinks to try again. The guild had reached for fear, which is the oldest weapon there is against the poor, and a 60-year-old woman with a stalk of grass had handed it right back to them across a laughing market. That evening, Sylvia came to the shop. She did not buy anything. She never did. She watched the back room empty out, watched the last of the neighbors leave still pressing stalks of grass between their fingers, and then she said quietly, I saw something in the forest, near the ancient oak, on the third day. Everything in me went still. Nova went stiller. I have it, Sylvia said. I have kept it since that day. I have not shown it to a single soul. She looked at me, and there was no triumph in it at all, which frightened me more than any triumph could have. I have a great many questions, Kai. About you. About how a 9-year-old walks a forest blind and never once sets his foot wrong. This is the moment, Nova said softly. She is telling you she could end you and has chosen not to. That is not a threat. That is the exact opposite of one. Not now, Sylvia said, before I could decide what to do with my face. You have a guild to beat. I am not going to be the one who breaks you in the middle of it. She turned for the door. But when this is over, you and I are going to talk. Honestly. She left. I stood there with my heart going hard against my ribs. She is holding the most dangerous fact in the kingdom about you, Nova said. And she just chose, right in front of you, not to use it. Kai, I believe she is becoming an ally. I think you are right, I said. And I think that is somehow more dangerous than if she had stayed an enemy. The guild's last move before the arbitration walked into my shop wearing 40 years of practice on his face. He was older than the 3 smiling men, and he did not smile at all. A lawyer, the genuine article. He introduced himself with the calm of a man who had never once walked into a room he had not already won before arriving. I will be representing the guild at the arbitration, he said. I came to save us both a little time. He set down no paper this time. He did not need any. He simply looked at me, a boy behind a counter, and delivered the trap whole. The arbitration is a matter of law, he said. Law is conducted by adults. A child cannot represent a district before the royal arbitration. He cannot speak, he cannot argue, he cannot be heard. Whatever clever little thing you believe you have found, boy, you will not be permitted to say it out loud. And there it was again. The same blade as the square. The same as the auction floor. They brought a child. He could not beat my argument, so he would simply make sure I was never allowed to make it. He bowed, polite, and left me holding it. Nova was already running it. He is correct again on the rules, she said. A minor cannot represent a district, but there is a path straight through him. Your father is the captain of record, and the tournament floor already established something the guild cannot undo. That I am an advisor, I said slowly, and there is no age on an advisor. Yes, Nova said. They are about to march you into the very same wall they believe is yours. Let them. I almost smiled, for the first time since the smiling men came to my counter. The guild thought my age was my soft spot. My father had already turned it into law on a public floor, in front of a king himself. Tomorrow, in the arbitration, I was going to let a 40-year lawyer learn that the hard way. Let him open with my age. I had a witness, a market full of believers, a clause the king's own law had written down, and one page I had not shown to a living soul yet. Tomorrow the smiling men would meet the open floor, and the open floor belonged to me. The arbitration chamber was built to make a poor man feel small. High ceiling, dark wood, a raised bench for the judge, and rows of seats already filling with people who had heard that a guild lawyer was about to crush the child from the lower district. We came in together, my father, broad and silent, Victor at his shoulder, looking like a wall in his one good coat. Me, small, with a voice in my head and a folded paper in my pocket. The judge took his seat. I knew him, and more to the point, he knew me. He had judged the tournament. He gave me the smallest nod and waved us through without the fuss the lawyer plainly expected. The guild lawyer rose first, smooth as oil, and did not begin with the charter. He began with me. Before we discuss the resin, he said, we must discuss who is permitted to discuss it. The District of Ashward appears to be represented by a child of 9. This is a court of law. A minor cannot give testimony of legal weight. A minor cannot represent a district. I move that the boy be barred from speaking at all. It was a clean opening. Cut the head off before the body can move. Half the room nodded along, because half the room had come to watch exactly that. Bob had wanted to come and had been told firmly that a chamber of the royal arbitration was not the place to demonstrate the sniff test. Leah and the lower district waited outside instead, a quiet crowd of people who had learned to press a stalk and check the sap, standing watch over a trial they were not allowed into. Object early or lose the floor, Nova said. But not from you, from Ren. This one is his to win. I did not say a single word. I just looked at my father, and my father stood up. Ren did not rush. He had learned, somewhere between the bog and this chamber, that a quiet man who stands up slowly takes the whole room with him. I am Ren of Ashward, he said. Captain of the district, party of record in this matter. He let it sit. The boy does not represent Ashward. I do. The boy is my advisor. The lawyer was ready for it. An advisor, he said smoothly, of 9 years. The court will surely, he began. The court already has, my father said. On the tournament floor, before the king himself, my right to name my own advisor was challenged and upheld. There is no law that sets an age on counsel. If the guild wishes to overturn a ruling made in front of the crown, let it try here and now. Otherwise my advisor speaks, and I speak through him, as is the plain right of a captain. Silence. The lawyer's mouth was already open for the next objection, and he shut it, because there was nowhere left to put it. The thing he thought was my weakness had been turned into settled law on a public floor weeks before, and he had marched his entire opening straight into it. The judge nodded slowly. The captain is correct, he said. The advisor may speak. Proceed. My father sat back down. He did not look at me, but as he lowered himself onto the bench, his hand brushed my shoulder once, the same shoulder, and gripped it. He fixed it, Nova said quietly. Whatever he did to you on that square, watch closely. He has spent these last weeks unbreaking it in public, one room at a time. I rose to speak, and for the first time in my life, a court of the kingdom had to sit and listen to a 9-year-old. I did not lead with my best card. You never do. I led with the witness because a witness walks in on his own 2 legs, and you cannot bury a living man under paper the way the guild buries a clause. I call the captain of Stonehall, I said. The door opened, and he came in. Scarred, straight-backed, the survivor that every soul in that chamber had heard about. The room shifted on its benches. The guild lawyer had prepared for a child and a charter. He had not prepared for a man the whole kingdom pitied and respected in the very same breath. The captain did not sit. He spoke standing, plain and hard. The tournament code, Article 17, Section B, he said. Participants of the tournament hold free and full access to the resources of the royal forest for the duration of the contest. It is the king's law. It does not bend to a charter, and no charter outranks it during the 3 days. I have lived by that code my whole life. I buried my entire team under it last week. I will not stand here and watch the guild pretend it does not exist. He looked once at the lawyer, once at me, and walked back out without waiting to be excused, because a man who has lost everything does not need anyone's leave to go. The chamber was very quiet. He came, Nova said softly, because Ashward was the only team that walked out of that forest with its honor intact. He did not do it for the resin. He did it because you carried your dead out the right way, and the guild has never once carried anything but coin. The charter no longer outranked the tournament, and the lawyer knew it. So he reached for his very last argument, and it was a clever one. The ancient oak, the lawyer said, is a protected natural monument of the kingdom. Even setting the charter wholly aside, the law forbids the harvesting and sale of any material taken from a protected monument. The resin was never lawful goods. It cannot be sold by anyone, charter or no charter. It was good. It was very good. It went around the witness, around the charter, around my father, and struck at the resin itself. The room murmured. A few of the foreign merchants shifted in their seats, because if the resin was contraband, their contracts died along with it. For one breath, the whole thing tilted toward the guild. Now, Nova said, this is the one. Give it to him exactly. I had spent a night in the Royal Archive with a voice in my head that read faster than any clerk alive, and I had found the thing the guild's 40-year lawyer never bothered to check, because men who always win eventually stop checking. The ancient oak held protected status once, I said. That much is true. I let it hang, the way Sylvia had taught me to without ever meaning to. But that status was repealed 12 years ago. The Trade Reform Decree, second session. It is recorded in the Secondary Archive, page 847. I drew the folded paper from my pocket, the copy I had made by candlelight, and laid it on the bench in front of the judge. The monument protection on that tree has not existed for 12 years, I said. There is nothing unlawful about the resin. There never was. The Guild's own archive says so, on a page its lawyer did not read. The lawyer reached for an answer, his mouth opened. And then, for the first time in 40 years of winning rooms before he ever walked into them, the Guild's lawyer had nothing at all to say. He stood there silent. I let him stay that way. The silence did all the rest of the work for me. 40 years he had walked into rooms already holding the ending. He had never once met an enemy who read the boring pages, the repealed ones, the corners of the archive nobody else bothered with. I had a voice that read every last one of them in a night. That was the whole of it. He had power. I had page 847. The judge read the page. He read it a second time. Then he set it down and did the one thing the Guild had spent 30 years making sure never happened to it. He ruled against it. The charter does not apply during the tournament, he said. The monument status was lawfully repealed. The resin was taken lawfully by a participant within the window the King's own code provides. The claim of the Merchant Guild is dismissed. The patent and the property of Ashward stand. It was over. Just like that. No roar, no crowd, only a judge's flat voice closing a door the Guild had been so certain it owned the key to. The Guild lawyer gathered his papers without a word and walked out, and he did not look at me on his way past, which from a man like him was the loudest thing he could have done. Probability on the claim, Nova said. 100%. You won, Kai. Clean. Victor reached over and clapped me once on the shoulder. Hard, the way men do it to other men, to equals. And for a second I had to work to keep my face still. Weeks ago, he had bet his name on a strange boy in a forest. He had just watched that bet take apart a monopoly in a court of the king. My father stood straighter than the bench around him. He said nothing. He did not have to. The man who once told me to stand aside on a square had just watched his 9-year-old son dismantle the most powerful guild in the kingdom with a folded scrap of paper, and he had been the one to win me the right to do it. We had not destroyed the guild. You do not destroy a thing that old in a single room. But we had made it lose, in public, on the one ground it had always called its own. Quick count of the day. 1 charter beaten, 1 lawyer silenced. 1 judge of the king ruling for the lowest district against the oldest guild in the land. And 1 folded page made by candlelight worth more in that chamber than 30 years of fine coats and quiet threats. We did not get to enjoy it for long. We never did. That was good work, Nova said as we gathered ourselves to leave. But understand exactly what just happened. The Guild does not lose twice the same way. They lost in a court of law, in the open, against witnesses, so they will stop fighting in the open. Probability the Guild moves against you again within 30 days, 67%. And the next move will not come at you directly. Where then? I asked. She was quiet a moment. They cannot beat Ashward as Ashward, she said. So they will try to make it district against district instead. They will go to Aurum. They will find the men on Aurum's council who already resent that the lowest district holds the highest right, and they will offer them a way to challenge you that does not carry the guild's name on it. Through Sylvia, I said, and my stomach turned over. Through Sylvia's people, Nova said, whether she likes it or not. We came out of the chamber into the daylight, and she was there. Sylvia, waiting on the steps, alone, the way she had taken to doing lately. She did not say anything at first. She simply fell into step beside me as we walked, quiet, and that silence told me she already knew exactly what Nova had only just worked out. They are going to come at me through your council, I said. Are they not? Sylvia looked straight ahead. They already started, she said. That is why I'm standing here. I looked at the white-haired girl who had called my district a pitiful little sight, walking beside me now to warn me about her own people. The guild had reached for the one weapon I could not answer with a clause. They were going to turn district against district, and the only road through it ran straight through Sylvia. The wager I had promised her on a forest path was about to come due, and neither of us yet knew the shape it would take. Sylvia did not waste any time once we were away from the chamber crowd. She stopped in a quiet street, turned to face me, and laid it out with the same flat precision she used on the auction floor. You see things you should not, she said. You are 9 years old, and you just took apart a guild lawyer with 40 years of practice. You walked a forest blind and never once stepped wrong. I have watched you for weeks now, and I have stopped being able to explain you. She folded her arms. I am not your enemy, Kai. I want that much clear. But I am going to understand what you are, one way or another. Either you tell me on your own terms, or I keep pulling threads until the whole thing comes apart in my hands. She is serious, Nova said quietly, and she has the resources to do exactly what she just promised. She is not bluffing. Orem has money, people, and reach. If she decides to dig, she will dig until she hits something. I believed her, and that was the whole problem. Sylvia did not threaten the way Mercanto threatened, or the way the guild threatened. She simply told you the truth about what she was going to do next, and then she went and did it. So I did the thing I always did when someone stronger had me cornered. I did not run, and I did not fight. I changed the game into one I could win. A wager, I said. Sylvia raised one eyebrow. I had her whole attention now. People who love to win always look up when you say the word wager. A contest, I said. You choose the format. Anything you like. If you win, I tell you one truth. One real answer, no lie, no dodge, the thing you have been trying to pull out of me for weeks. She went very still. And if I win, I said, Orem works with Ashward for 1 year. Your knowledge, your connections, my resources. We stop circling each other and we build something instead. It was a good wager, and she knew it. If she won, she got the one thing she wanted most in the world, which was the truth about me. If she lost, she got a year tied to the fastest rising district in the kingdom, which was hardly a punishment. She studied me for a long moment, hunting for the trick in it. There was no trick. There was just a boy who would far rather make a dangerous person his partner than spend the next year watching his own back for her shadow. Within the week, she said at last, and a small, real smile, the kind I had only seen once before, crossed her face. You really are a strange one, Kai of Ashward. We shook on it. Right there in the street, the captain of Orem and the 9-year-old advisor of Ashward, hands clasped like two merchants closing a deal. People stopped to watch. They should have. The girl who said a pitiful little sight was shaking hands with the boy she had said it about, as an equal, in the middle of the kingdom. You just turned your most dangerous rival into a business partner with a handshake, Nova said. I have filed it under moves I did not see coming. I am running short of room under that heading, and it is mostly you. Make a bigger heading, I told her. She came back 2 days later with the format, and it told me everything about how her mind worked. 3 rounds, she said. First, knowledge of geography and resources, what the kingdom holds and exactly where. Second, a trade calculation, a real one, the kind that ruins men who get it wrong. And third, she paused, and I saw she had saved her favorite for last. Find, within a single day, something of value that no one in the kingdom knows exists. A new thing. Bring it to the judges and prove its worth. Be careful, Nova said at once. Look at what she has built. Geography, calculation, discovery. She has made a contest out of the 3 things you are best at in the world. She is not trying to beat you, Kai. She wants to watch you win, up close, so she can finally see how the trick is actually done. She is testing the mechanism, I thought. Not the boy. The method. Clever, I said aloud to Sylvia. Suspiciously clever. You picked my strongest ground on purpose. Of course I did, she said, entirely unbothered. I do not want to beat a weak version of you. I want to watch the real one work. Then she added, almost to herself, and if you are everything I think you are, a year of working together will be worth more to Orem than any single truth. So she half wanted to lose. That was the most dangerous thing about Sylvia. She played to win and planned to lose at the same time, and either way she walked out ahead. The first 2 rounds I could handle with what Nova already carried. The third one needed something new, something real, and that night Nova handed it to me. There is a waterway, she said, under the merchant quarter. Old, forgotten, built generations ago and buried when the new wells went in. I have been mapping the kingdom's water through your eyes for weeks. It is still down there and it still runs. Cleared and reopened, it would cut the cost of water in the lower district by 60%. I sat up straight. That was not a product. That was not a rare grass or a drop of gold to sell once and spend once. That was infrastructure. Cheaper water, every single day, for the poorest part of the kingdom. It is not a thing you sell, I said. It is a thing you give. And it changes a life every day instead of once. I thought of Leah's mother hauling water up from the low wells every dawn, of every family in my district that measured the morning by how far the water was. 60% cheaper was not a number to people like them. It was an hour of someone's morning handed back every single day for the rest of their lives. Yes, Nova said, and nobody knows it is there, which is precisely what the third round is asking for. My father came in while I was still turning it over. He sat down across from me, and instead of telling me to stay out of the way, he said, tell me the plan. So I told him. All of it. The wager. The 3 rounds. The waterway under the merchant quarter. Exactly what it would do for the lower district. He listened to the whole of it, start to finish. The first time in my life, my father heard a plan of mine out without once cutting it short. When I finished, he stood up. "Good luck tomorrow," he said. And from Ren, that was a whole speech. That was him saying, as out loud as he knew how to, that he was with me. The contest drew a crowd. After the tournament and the arbitration, the kingdom had decided that whatever the lower district boy did next was worth watching, and a public match against the captain of Orem was exactly the sort of thing they turned out for. Round 1. Geography. Sylvia answered fast and clean, every river and ridge and ore vein at her fingertips. 7 years of training showed in every word. I answered a half-beat slower because Nova needed her fraction of a second to feed me, but I added the things Sylvia did not. The Eastern Silver Mines, I said, throw off a second seam of cinnabar as waste rock. Nobody collects it. It is worth more than the silver if you know what to do with it. The judges checked. It was true. A tie on speed, but the crowd saw the difference plain. She knew the map. I knew what was hidden in the corners of it. Round 2, the trade calculation. A brutal one. A dozen moving costs built in to trip a careless mind. Sylvia was faster again. We both came back correct, but our answers were not the same shape. She maximized the profit of the next month. I maximized the profit of the next 10 years, slower but far larger, and the judges ruled both of us right. 2 rounds, 2 ties. The crowd was leaning in now. Nobody had expected the boy to hold even ground with Auram's pride. And nobody, Sylvia included, knew what the third round would bring out of me. She glanced at me before it began. Not worried, curious. She had built this whole contest to see the trick, and the trick was about to walk straight out into the daylight. For the third round, I brought them a river they had forgotten they owned. I laid it out for the judges, the old waterway under the merchant quarter, mapped and measured, the cost of clearing it, the water it would give back, the 60% it would cut from the price of living in the lower district. Not a thing to sell, a thing that would make thousands of ordinary days a little less hard. The judges leaned over the map and went quiet. Then Sylvia presented hers, and it was good, genuinely good. She had found a network of small village traders, scattered and overlooked, who could be tied into a single buying co-op that would lower prices across half the kingdom. Different from mine, but aimed at the very same thing. Both of us had gone hunting for hidden value, and both of us had come back not with treasure to hoard, but with a way to make the poor a little less poor. The judges conferred for a long time. Then the head judge spoke. "Round 3 is a tie," he said. "Both discoveries are real. Both are valuable, and they are not rivals. They complete each other." He looked between us. "We rule that the 2 districts shall build both together. Neither of us had won, neither of us had lost. And now, by the judge's own order, Orem and Ashward were bound to work side by side." Sylvia looked at me across the square. Nova was almost laughing in my head. "Neither of you won," she said. "Neither of you lost. And now you are required to do the exact thing you wagered over in the first place. I am beginning to suspect the 2 of you planned this." "We did not," I said. "But I would have, if I were clever enough." I crossed to Sylvia. "I still owe you one truth," I said quietly, low enough that the crowd could not catch it. "Under my terms. When the time is right for it." "When?" she asked. "When you have earned it," I said. And she did not argue, because she of all people understood that some things have to be earned before they can be safely handed over. We had a year of building ahead of us now, Orem and Ashward, rival beside rival. It should have felt like peace, but Nova had warned me the guild would come at me through Sylvia's own counsel, and somewhere inside Orem, men who hated this handshake were already reaching for a way to break it. 3 weeks went by, and for 3 weeks we built. The waterway came back to life, one cleared channel at a time. Victor ran the crews. Orem sent men and money as the wager bound them too, and Sylvia's people and mine worked side by side in the same wet tunnels, which would have been unthinkable a month before. Then the water ran, and the price of it in the lower district fell and kept on falling. Meanwhile, the shop did the thing Nova kept failing to predict. "The customer flow is climbing faster than my model," she said, almost annoyed. "I projected steady growth. This is not steady. This is a line going straight up. Your model does not account for people who love cheap water," I told her. "Give me the numbers." "The queue forms before dawn now," she said. "Leah advises the suppliers on quality. Victor manages 3 rooms instead of 1. The co-op with Orem has lowered prices in 9 villages, and the lower district pays 60% less for water than it did a month ago." 60%. I walked the lower district that week and saw what that number actually meant. Leah's mother was not hauling water up the hill at dawn anymore. A family that used to choose between water and bread was buying both. The waterway sat on no board anywhere, but it had changed more ordinary mornings than the resin ever would. That was the part the guild could never understand. They counted gold. I had started counting the hours I handed back to people who had never once had an hour to spare. Leah's mother stopped me in the street that week. She did not thank me with words, because the lower district is not built for speeches. She pressed a warm loaf into my hands, the kind you only bake when you finally have flour to spare, and walked off before I could give it back. That loaf told me more than any board ever could. It was working. Of course it was working. Which meant, somewhere in a fine room, men in fine coats were deciding it had been allowed to work long enough. The blow came, as it always did, dressed up as concern. A messenger from the merchant quarter arrived, wringing his hands, very sorry to be the one to bring it. People are frightened, he said. They are saying the lower district does things no honest district can do. Water out of nowhere. Grass that will not die. They are using a word again. Witchcraft. I almost laughed, and not because it was funny. Sorting herbs and clearing an old tunnel, I thought. Nothing in my whole operation had ever sounded less demonic, and here it was being called black magic for the second time in a season. The same weapon, Nova said flatly. They reached for fear in the market once, and a 60-year-old woman handed it back to them. So they have picked it up again, larger this time, and aimed it at the waterway. The guild does not invent new fears. It just keeps swinging the old one until something finally breaks. It was clever in its ugliness. You cannot beat a district in a court, so you make its neighbors afraid of it instead. And fear does not care about page 847. A frightened man never checks the archive. He just stops coming and tells his cousin to stop coming too. The old rumor had been about the goods, and Leah had killed it in a single market. This one was bigger. It was about the water, the growth, the whole impossible rise of the district that used to be the kingdom's punchline. They were not asking how we sold good grass anymore. They were asking how a pack of nobodies had climbed so far so fast, and the guild was whispering the answer it wanted them to hear. It cannot be honest. So I gave them an answer they could put their hands on. I did not argue the rumor. You cannot argue with fear. You can only outshow it. I took the back room of the shop, the one where Leah had taught a handful of neighbors to press a stalk, and I made it permanent, not a secret. The exact opposite of a secret. An open hall, every day, where anyone in the whole kingdom could walk in and watch precisely how everything was done. Come in, I told them, and we meant every word of it. Watch the grass get cut. Watch the moss get packed. Watch the water get cleared. Ask anything you like. Touch anything you like. We will hand you the knife and let you try it yourself. And Leah ran it. The quiet girl who once would not speak above a whisper now stood at the front of a room full of strangers, teaching the kingdom how the lower district did its impossible things, one plain step at a time. There was no spell anywhere in it. There was a cut angle, a preservative root, and an old channel under the quarter. Magic dies the instant a frightened man does the trick with his own two hands. Bob naturally appointed himself the expert and held up a dyed fake as the finest sample in the room, right up until a neighbor reached over, pressed the stalk, and showed the white sap. The hall roared. You cannot stay afraid of witches who let the fat boy embarrass himself for your entertainment. The fear drained out of that hall a little more with every laugh. Word spread, the good kind this time. People did not leave whispering about magic. They left knowing how to spot a fake, clear a channel, keep their own meat fresh. We had given the secret away, and the giving was the whole defense. A monopoly survives on what only it knows. We had just taught the street to do what we did, and you cannot frighten people about a thing they now understand. The chance that rumor survives the open hall is very low, Nova said. And Kai, something is happening to my numbers that I do not entirely like. What is happening to your numbers? I asked. They are wrong, Nova said. Not a little wrong. Wrong at the root. I built my models on goods and resources, things I can count, sacks of grass, drops of resin, coins. I have always been able to tell you the value of what you hold, but the open hall holds nothing I can weigh. You gave the knowledge away, and your position grew stronger, not weaker. By every model I have, that should be impossible. There it was, the thing I had felt coming since the river, the day an old man pulled 5 fish out of water I had already written off. Nova could count anything you put in a sack. And the thing that was actually carrying us now did not fit in a sack at all. You counted the goods, I told her. You have to start counting the trust. Trust is not a measurable quantity, she said. It is the only quantity that matters now, I said. The guild has more gold than us, more lawyers, more charters. We beat them anyway, every single time, because a market full of people would rather believe a girl who taught them to press a stalk than a man in a fine coat who needs them afraid. That is the asset. Not the grass. The people who learned to trust us by watching us hide nothing from them. A long pause. Then Nova said, slowly, I will need a unit. If I am to count trust, I require a unit of measurement. Call it 1 Leah, I said. Another pause. That is not rigorous, she said. It is the most rigorous thing I have ever told you, I answered. And it was. The whole season had been Nova learning the one lesson she could not calculate her way around. She was not the system. She was the sharpest part of a system built out of people, and people do not go in a sack. That was when Sylvia came through the door, and she was carrying something wrapped in cloth. She did not say a word at first. She waited until the hall had emptied, until it was only the two of us, and then she unwrapped the cloth on the counter. It was a piece of metal, curved, dark, scorched along one edge, made of nothing this kingdom had ever forged. I knew it the instant I saw it. So did Nova, who went completely silent in the way she had not been since the night the North went quiet. I found this near the ancient oak, Sylvia said. In the clearing, on the third day. I have kept it ever since. I have shown it to no one. She set it down between us. It is not from any forge in this kingdom, Kai. I have asked the best of them. So now I am going to ask you, and I will know if you lie to me. I looked at the metal, and I looked at the girl who had carried the most dangerous secret in the kingdom in her own pocket for weeks, rather than use it against me. Tell her, Nova said quietly. You promised her one truth. This is the moment to pay it. She has earned the price. I sent the last of the haul out. Then I told her one true thing. That is from a ship, I said. It fell out of the sky. Not from this kingdom. Not from anywhere you keep a map of. And what was aboard that ship is with me now. Sylvia did not gasp. She did not call for guards. She just stood there, holding the impossible in her two hands, and let it settle into her. What was aboard the ship? She asked. Not today, I said. That is one truth. You will get the others when you have earned them, one at a time. She nodded slowly, and then she did the thing that told me she was truly on my side. She wrapped the metal back up, and she said, I have 7 questions, Kai. I am going to ask them one at a time when the moment is right for each one. And until the last is answered, this stays in my pocket and no one else's. She likes me, Nova murmured. I find that genuinely worrying. Coming from Nova, that was practically a wedding toast. Sylvia did not leave after that. She had come for 2 reasons, and the medal had only been the first. There is something you need to know, she said, tucking the cloth away. The guild has stopped coming at you directly. They learned that much in the arbitration, so now they are coming at you through me. Through my council. I felt the floor tilt under me. Tell me. There are men on the Orem Council who hate that the lowest district holds the highest right, she said. The guild has gone to them quietly, with an offer. If Orem formally challenges the classification of the amber resin, it stops being the guild against Ashward. It becomes district against district, Orem against the upstarts, and the guild's name never appears anywhere on it. It was beautiful, in the way a good trap is beautiful. The guild had found a way to make Orem swing the blade while it stood back and watched, and if Orem challenged the resin, Nova was already running the math. If they contest the classification, she said, 3 of the foreign contracts collapse. The merchants pull their delegation, and the funding your council is counting on for 3 projects vanishes right along with them. So the guild can wound us, Sylvia said, by making my own council wound itself. She looked at me. I did not come here only to hand back your secret, Kai. I came because I cannot stop this one alone. We have to go to my council, together. The guild knew how to make war with other people's hands, beautifully. It was time to walk into Orem and finish this where it had started, with Sylvia standing at my side instead of across from me. Win the council, and the resin held. Lose it, and 3 projects died, the merchants sailed home, and the lowest district would learn how it feels to be dragged down by the people beside it. The guild had aimed the blade well. Now I had to make Orem refuse to hold it. The Orem Council met in a hall built to remind you of your place. Tall windows, a long table of old men, and a door you did not walk through unless you were Orem. I walked through it beside Sylvia. The room stopped. An elder at the head of the table half rose. Orem does not enter with Ashward, he said, as though he were reciting a law of nature. It does today, Sylvia said, and kept walking, and set me at the table beside her. I wanted understood what that cost her. Every man at that table had watched her be Orem's pride for 7 straight years. Walking in shoulder to shoulder with the lower district boy, she spent a piece of that in public on me. If I was wrong about any of this, she fell with me, in front of the very people she had spent her whole life impressing. The rumors will say the 2 of you are something you are not, Nova murmured. Walking in together like this. Did you consider that? Let them, I thought. We are not arm in arm. We are something rarer than the thing they will whisper. We are two rivals who decided the same enemy was worse than each other. The elders looked at me the way the square once had. A child, an intruder, a thing that did not belong in the room. It was the same wound as the very first day, walked straight into the highest chamber of the strongest district. Except this time, I had brought the captain of that district in with me. If anyone ever paints the story of my district, this is the picture they should choose. Not the forest, not the gold. The day the girl who called us a pitiful little sight walked into her own council with the burden at her side and dared her own elders to laugh. The eldest of them did not bother to hide it. He looked at me, then at Sylvia, and asked the question the whole room was already thinking. Why, he said, should this council take the word of a 9-year-old child? There it was. The same blade as the square. They brought a child, a pitiful little sight. The exact wound, swung one more time in the highest room I had ever set foot in. But this time, I did not have to answer it. Sylvia did. She stood. She did not raise her voice. She never needed to. And I finally understood that the same cold control she had once used to cut me down was about to be turned the other way. You ask why you should trust him, she said, slow and clear, to the men who had taught her everything she knew. I will tell you, because he has been right every single time, and you have not. The room went silent. He called the resin unowned, and he was right, she said. He found a clause your own lawyers missed, and he was right. He cleared a waterway none of you knew you owned, and the lower district pays less to live because of it. He saw the guild's hand inside this very council, before a single one of you felt it on your shoulder. She let it land, point by point. Every time this district has bet against that boy, this district has lost. I am only the first at this table with the spine to say it out loud. I had carried her worst sentence for a whole season. Now I watched her spend her own standing to unsay it, in front of the men she answered to. She had cut me down coldly on a square. She defended me with the exact same cold, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard her do. She sat. The elders did not look at me like a child anymore. They looked at me like a problem they could no longer afford to be wrong about. So I gave them a reason to be right. I did not plead. You do not plead to a room like that. You show them their own numbers until the smart choice is the only one left standing in the room. Here is what happens if you challenge the resin, I said. The classification fight voids 3 foreign contracts. The merchant delegation sails home. And the 3 projects this council has already promised funding to, the ones you have spent on paper, lose their backing overnight. You will have struck Ashward and bled Aurum to do it. The guild walks away clean, having paid nothing and lost nothing at all. I let that settle. Then I gave them the other door, or you do not challenge it. The contracts hold, the delegation stays. Your 3 projects get funded, and Ashward gives Aurum first rights on every future find we make in the Royal Forest. You stop being the district the guild used as a weapon, and you become the district that holds first claim on whatever comes next. You could watch them doing the arithmetic. These were not stupid men. They were proud men, which is a different thing, and pride had nearly led them into the guild's trap by the nose. The numbers did what numbers do. They made pride look expensive. The guild had spent weeks building a trap out of these men's resentment. I took it apart with a column of their own figures. That was the whole difference between us. The guild made them afraid of losing their place. I simply showed them, down to the coin, exactly what staying afraid was going to cost. Nova, helpful as ever, offered, I can prepare a second table breaking the projected returns down by category. No, I told her. Look at their faces. They have already decided. Another table will only insult them, and I would like to leave this room with allies, not with a lecture delivered to old men. The eldest folded his hands. We will not challenge the resin, he said, and it plainly cost him something to say it. The council agreed, one grudging nod at a time. The guild's beautiful trap, the one meant to turn district against district, had just been quietly disarmed by the 2 people it was built to split apart. And that was when the guild stopped using other people's hands and went straight to the only authority left above us all. The king. The guild's last move was its oldest one. When you cannot win in a court or a council, you go to the throne. They requested an audience with the king, and because the matter now touched foreign trade and the peace between districts, he granted it and called us all before him, the guild's delegate, my father, Sylvia, and me. The throne room was the largest room I had ever stood in, and the quietest. The guild delegate spoke first, smooth and grave, laying out 3 failures of process. 3 places where a child had been allowed to act above his station, all of it polished until it sounded, for a moment, almost reasonable. Then the foreign merchants spoke. The southern delegation, the old man in the green coat among them. The boy found a resource that enriched your kingdom, he said. Every attempt to undo his discovery has come from men who lost to him fairly. We ask the crown to protect what is honest. The king listened to all of it. Then he looked past the delegate, past my father, past Sylvia, and he found me. I want to hear the advisor, the king said. And Nova, for the first time since a forest, said nothing at all. No prompt, no line in my ear. This one is yours, she said quietly, and went silent, and left me standing in front of a king with no voice in my head but my own. My knees were shaking. On the inside, where nobody could see them, which I thought was at least polite of them. I stepped forward, a 9-year-old in a throne room, and I spoke for myself. Our district was the poorest in your kingdom, I said. We walked into a tournament we were never meant to win, and we won it by finding something that was always there, that no one had bothered to look for. 3 times the guild has tried to take it back, with charters and lawyers and fear. 3 times it has lost, because what we did was honest. I am not asking you to favor us. I am only asking you to let honest work stand. The throne room held its breath. So did I. The king was quiet for a long moment, and in that moment, I had no idea which way a crown would fall. Then he spoke, and what he said changed my district forever. The patent of Ashward, he declared, is no longer held for 10 years. It is permanent. Permanent. I heard Sylvia let out a slow breath beside me. From 0 rights to 10 years to forever, in the span of a single season. The lowest district had just been handed a seat at the table that could never be taken back. He was not finished. The charter rights of the merchant guild within tournament zones, he said, are hereby limited. A monopoly that overreaches forfeits its reach. The guild delegate's face did not move, but his hands did, just slightly, and I marked it, because that small movement was the sound of 30 years of quiet power losing a piece of itself in public. And there is the matter of administration, the king went on. He looked at my father, Wren of Ashward. You will serve as royal advisor on resources. Your district found what the kingdom's own guild walked past for 30 years. The crown would be a fool not to keep you close. And Victor, the steady man at my father's shoulder, was named official manager of the patent, on the record, by the crown itself. Nova was quiet. Then she said, almost to herself, I do not have a calculation for this. I have a value for the patent, for the contracts, for the water. I do not have one for the look on your father's face. I am going to leave that one uncounted. Leave it uncounted, I said. Some things you simply keep. We walked out of that throne room into the light, and for 1 whole minute the kingdom held no enemy I had to outthink. The guild was checked. The patent was permanent. My father was the king's own man. It was, very nearly, peace. It lasted exactly until Sylvia caught my arm. I held the most dangerous thing in the kingdom in my pocket through all of that, she said quietly. Through the council, through the king. I could have ended you with it a dozen times today, and I chose not to, again. She looked at me, level and serious. I have earned one true answer, Kai. A real one. Not today. Not in front of all this. But soon, she had. There was no honest way to say otherwise. She had carried my secret into the highest rooms in the kingdom and set it down on no one's table but her own. You have, I said. Ask, and I will answer it true. Not yet, she said, and almost smiled. I want to choose the question carefully. A truth like yours, you do not waste on a small one. I had thought the day was almost peaceful, right up until the word true. Of course, the hardest thing left was not the king or the guild. It was a white-haired girl with 7 questions, and the first honest conversation I had ever been afraid to have. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, the lowest district in the kingdom had a permanent seat at the table, and a boy they once called a burden had been the one to put it there. Day 61. Nova told me the number the way she always told me numbers, except this one she seemed to enjoy. Day 61, she said. The initial probability of Ashward winning anything was 4%. I would like that kept on the record. It is on the record, I said. You put it there yourself, at 4 in the morning while I was trying to sleep. The shop opened at dawn because the queue started before dawn. That was the part that still caught me. People lined up in the dark outside a lower district shop in the center of the kingdom, waiting for it to open, the way they once lined up outside Aurum. From 0 shops to 1 permanent shop with a line that began before I even woke. This is exponential growth, Nova announced. It is very early in the morning, I told her, to be using words that long. But she was right, and we both knew it. The district they had called a pitiful little sight now had a line at dawn and a permanent seat at the king's table. The sentence Sylvia threw at us on the square had finally completely turned over. Nobody stood in that line to laugh at us. They stood in it to buy from us. Inside, everyone had a place, and the places had grown into something that ran without me hovering over it. A customer came in confused, holding a bundle of herbs, asking who could tell him whether they were any good. Go to Leah first, 3 people told him at once, before any of us could answer. Go to Leah first. It had become the thing people simply said. Leah, the girl who once would not finish a sentence above a whisper. Now the lower district called her the expert, and meant it, and the rest of the kingdom had started to as well. Victor ran the floor and the books with the same steady weight he had once used to hold a circle together in a forest. And my father came by most mornings, royal advisor on resources now, and stood in the shop he had once been too ashamed to even imagine, watching his son work. The named proof I had gathered one person at a time, a girl with herbs, a man with heavy fists, a father with a hand on a shoulder, had stopped being a collection of people. It had become a system, a district, a thing that would keep standing whether or not the boy in the middle of it ever explained the voice in his head. Victor built the queue and ran the day. But the queue, every single morning, listened to Leah. Sylvia and I had a place by then. The roof of the shop, where nobody climbed and nobody listened, the one spot in the kingdom where the captain of Orem and the advisor of Ashward could simply sit. She came up that evening, as she did, and for a while we said nothing, which is its own kind of friendship. You won more than the tournament, she said at last, looking over the district. You know that. Nobody in this kingdom will call you a burden again. They would not dare. From Sylvia, even a compliment came out sounding like a test. I had learned to hear the warmth underneath it. Then she did the thing she had promised on the open hall floor. She asked one of her 7 questions. This is the 6th, she said. Does the voice know things on its own, or only what you show it? Only what I show it, I said. It sees what I see. It hears what I hear. If I look away from a thing, it goes blind to it the same as me. She was quiet, fitting that into everything else she had worked out about me. So if you stopped looking, she said slowly, it would stop knowing. That is right, I said. She nodded, filing it away with the rest. One question left then, she said. I am saving it. And she did not say what for, and I did not ask, because some debts you are content to leave open between friends. That night, after the shop closed, Nova said a thing she had never said before. My models were wrong, she said. From the very beginning. I told you, on the first night, that Ashward had a 4% chance. I built that number out of resources and strength and the way the world had always behaved. I did not account for the one variable that actually won this. You. Building bonds I had no way to measure. People who would stand in a forest for a strange boy. A girl who would not sell your secret for a crown. A father who learned how to listen. That is not like you, I said. To admit a model was wrong. It is new, she said. I do not enjoy being wrong, but I am beginning to think being wrong about you is the most interesting thing that has happened to me since I fell out of the sky. Get used to it, I told her. Bob has not even had breakfast yet, and Bob alone breaks more of your models before noon than the whole guild managed in a season. She made a sound that, on a person, I would have called a laugh. It was a small thing. But a season ago, she had been a cold voice reading me my odds of dying in a forest. Now, she made something close to a laugh on a rooftop, over a boy and his ridiculous friends, and could not put a number on why. That, more than the patent, was the thing I was proudest of. The Stawn Hall captain came to the shop one last time near the end of that week. He stood in the doorway and looked at the line, the full shelves, the district that had risen while his own team stayed behind in the forest. He did not look bitter. He looked like a man making sure of something. You knew, he said quietly when he reached the counter. About the north, the snakes. You knew that ground was death. And you said nothing to us. I could have lied. I did not. I knew, I said, and I did not know how to warn you without explaining things I cannot explain to anyone. I have thought about it every day since. It is the one part of all this I would undo, if I could. He studied me a long moment. Then he nodded, slow, taking it for the honest answer it was. You have a rare skill, boy, he said, turning to go. He stopped at the door. See that it serves something larger than one shop. The kingdom is wide and it is full of people dying of things you could fix, who you will never once see from behind this counter. Then he was gone. Was that a rebuke, Nova asked softly, or advice? Both, I said. The dead were not a number to me, and I was not going to let them become one. The captain had handed me the single thing a permanent patent could not, which was the weight to use it well. That night, I climbed to the roof alone, and I looked up. There is a star, I said, that moves differently from the others. 3 nights running now. It does not sit where stars are meant to sit. Nova was quiet for a long moment. I see it, she said. You have seen it before, I said. It was not a question. Yes, she said. I did not tell you. While it only moves, there is nothing to be done. When that changes, you will be the first to know. Is it them? I asked. The ones who left you? The ones who said they were sorry and jumped and let you fall? Yes, she said. Do you want to go back to them? I asked. It was the longest pause she had ever given me, longer than the night I asked her to take 4% all the way to 100. Then she said, I do not know. I thought about it for so long that I believe I stopped wanting it. I have a unit of measurement now, 1 Leah. I did not used to have one of those. When they come, I said, we decide together. Together, Nova said. And for the first time, it was not a calculation. It was a choice. She measured the star anyway, because she is who she is. It is brighter than 3 nights ago, she said, only by a fraction. Below me in the dark, I could see my father carrying a crate into the shop for the morning, moving easier than he had on the first day of the tournament, like a man who had finally set something heavy down. The old me would have called every part of this impossible and gone home to be furniture. The new me looked at a star learning to move and a district learning to stand and decided the sky could wait its turn. Let it move, I told her. The shop opens early. We are busy.
Kai's story matters because a weak boy does not win by becoming louder than everyone else. He wins by seeing the hidden variables that stronger people ignore. Nova gives him data, but data alone never carries Ashward out of the forest. Kai turns that data into victory by combining it with Grandpa Mark's instinct, Leah's plant knowledge, Victor's trust, Ren's public support, and Sylvia's dangerous honesty. That is the real lesson of this video. A secret power is useful only when it helps you build a system around real people. The guild tries to rule through papers, rumors, fear, and monopoly. Kai breaks that control by opening the process, teaching the street, sharing knowledge, and making trust more valuable than ownership. So take this from the story. Being underestimated can hide you for a while, but it becomes true strength only when you use that silence to observe better, choose better allies, and build something useful enough that even your enemies have to change their calculations.